Think we're live. All right. Welcome to another episode of the Nervous System Training Podcast. Crazy episode we're going to get into. We're going to talk about the Notorious and his terrible techniques on kicking, blowing out his knee in the first opening seconds of his return fight. And we're going to kind of talk about like why this happened, kind of clear up a lot of the speculation because there's like a lot of weird like meta and like almost metaphysical variables people are trying to pull into the equation on why Conor injured himself. In reality, it's just a simple game of physics, and he just made a terrible decision with some technique. And then we're going to talk about the up squat and how this machine is so valuable in the experiment that I've been running on myself. Right, so we got a lot of fun stuff to talk about. And I guess let's jump right into it. Let's start with this Conor thing. So you saw it last night. I saw it. Conor McGregor has been off of fighting for what, like 5 years now or something like that?
Yeah, it was like the second longest layoff or something like that.
Yeah, because he got a would you call it a compound break in his tibia, like when it snapped, and had it repinned, got on a bunch of PEDs, legally got on a bunch of PEDs, maybe legally towards the end too, put on a ton of weight, went up a weight class, right, and he came back to fight Max Holloway. And as soon as the fight starts, Conor McGregor sprints across the cage, does a launching roundhouse kick, not a kip, right, not a flying knee, but a roundhouse kick, a flying roundhouse kick, which is never taught. It's it's something, if you work with any real competent Muay Thai coach or striking coach, they'll never teach a technique like that because it makes no sense to do it that way, right? And we're going to kind of break down like why it happened. But first thing, if you look at the kick, I sent you the slow motion last night of how the kick happened. Now, there's a lot of people that are immediately going into the classic foot pronation model to knee valgus model and how that teared the ACL, which there's that model is helpful to kind of explain what happened, but Conor doesn't have foot pronation. He actually has a very high supinated foot. And basically, if any one of us, if you do it, if I do it, if any one of us tries to do a running broad jump roundhouse kick where they land on the supporting leg, the weight, especially as they're rotating through the air, your knee is going to explode, right? It doesn't matter. It's going to happen to John Jones. It's going to happen to everyone because that type of force at that angle is just way too great. And that's what we call the weak angle. That's the angle of impact where you can't recover movement from. Now, if you look in the locker room, there's actually footage going around. He was practicing that kick in the locker room, but the difference is he didn't have a running start when he threw it in the locker room, right? He does like when you do that karate kick where like you kip one knee to gain your momentum, and so you can like rotate the leg through the air. He was doing it like that, right? You kip, rotate, land on his toe, make impact, and then you can recover. But as you add a running start and he overextended, like what is the force multiplies like 3 times the amount, 4 times the amount of force. And he landed flat-footed, and you just see his knee just explode underneath him, right? Now, Lyneil, what were your first thoughts? Because you're the one that gave me this new weak angle lens. What are your new thoughts when like you saw it? What do you think about it now, and what's your kind of take?
Yeah, basically my brain automatically goes to the weak angle. So I know something weak angle happened. But again, we were talking about this in the pre-show. I was just super disappointed as a fan initially, right? So I wanted to see a great fight. And it was like,
Yeah.
man, how many fights like that have ended with an eye poke or some injury that was this showcase fight? And it's the sad part about MMA and how things like that can happen. But then also I was happy for Max Holloway. I'm like, all right, man, he's gonna get paid again for this third fight. those are just being, genuine. But as the clinician, you're getting my my brain going. Actually, one of the first things I thought was everybody's going to come out talking about these biomechanical inefficiencies, and people want to be a physical therapist or a orthopedic diagnostician or whatever you want to say, right? But just the truth is, coming back to what you're saying, there's just no competitive advantage of putting yourself in the weak angle like that. Right. And so whether, anybody could handle those forces or not, what do you really think that you're going to do with that kick? It's not going to, make it the impact that you want. There's no knockout coming off of that kick, like you just said. Not only is it dangerous, it's just not effective. But like you said, you saw him doing it in the warm up where he was keeping his base of support, more centered over underneath of his, center of mass or center of gravity. Well, why
Right.
is that? This is the actual real thing that I think about. Again, somebody that has competed, and what happens when you get rusty, and especially in striking. I haven't fought in MMA, but enough with wrestling and doing some of the training and working with MMA athletes over the years. One of the biggest things that you have a tough time with, I think, is going from sparring and training to into real competition and judging distance. Right. And so I think that, if he would have taken the time to get his, distance dialed in with Max, it would have been a lot better than, like what you said, sprinting across the cage and trying to throw this kind of, anime type of kick or something, right? From Goku or, Street Fighter or something. But yeah, so if you look at it, I mean, all three planes of movement, he's out of alignment, right? That's probably one of the biggest differences. Even if you go back to that warm up video, he's in a better posture and a better alignment where his body is almost falling
Yeah.
backward, right?
Yeah,
When
the
he
spine the spine goes way over the pelvis, and
So
that's
it's yeah, and this is almost like those Achilles tears. Like, how are you going to deliver force going forward if you're falling backwards? Like, it doesn't. That's just not the way that you're going to be able to create power. With any type of movement. But you add that rotational component to it, and then as Max sidesteps and moves away, now Conor's even more spread out because the target went away from where he was. And again, if you see him warming up, the guy's standing right in front of him. So basically, the guy doesn't move, and Conor's able to deliver that kick, basically straight on. But now Max moves away, and so now that target, he tries to stretch his body even further away to hit. And again, I think judging that distance really actually ended up being part of the problem as well. The
yeah.
weak angle strikes again.
Yeah, weak angle maxing. It's we got to make a movement out of it.
Yeah, you should tell the people why you're saying that. You sent me those videos, right?
Oh yeah, so looks maxing or just using the term, it's just like what the kids are doing these days, where they'll put maxing at the end of any sort of like quality they're trying to improve in their life, right? And it started with these guys who would like they would try to do everything they can to improve their looks for like dating, right? And there's this one guy, Clavicular. He's a streamer who like really got this popular. He took it as far as like taking like objects and like hitting the side of his face like throughout the day to create like calcium deposits so his cheekbones are more defined, right? I don't know if it works. Maybe in theory it could, but that's called looks maxing. And so I'm trying to start a movement called weak angle maxing, where I always send you videos of people who fall into the weak angle. Basically, any position where you can't create force from. Efficient force, like fast, like force at speed. And kind of going back to this Connor thing, one thing that I thought about is the fact that if you're, like you said, if you're always practicing a kick on a stationary target, your body, you're also giving your nervous system a lot of preparation for that kick to land and that kinetic energy to leave your body, right? Because it gets displaced in the kick, and the recoil from the kick helps you recover. Now, when you have someone who's actually can move, it's not a stationary target, and you don't telegraph it from like 1,000 miles away. You have to extend your body so far, and the kick kind of misses. That means all that eccentric force doesn't leave your body. It stays in your body. That's why when you miss a strike, it feels so much more exhausting because you have to recover all that force of your body and pull it back into a reset. And it just makes you more tired. So now there's, like I said, with the whole biomechanic thing, right? Now, Conor McGregor does have
And
some like
can I point something out?
sure.
I don't I don't know if this is one of your video games shirts, but you got the picture on your shirt right there, right?
Yeah.
You look,
Oh yeah, good point.
yeah, yeah. So that's I think that's probably more what it should have looked like, right?
Yeah, yeah. So this is Dragon Lake Muay Thai from my Muay Thai coach. Shout out to Mei T at Final Round and Warrior Way. So Mei T, and I thought about the actually it's great that I wore this shirt. So Mei T would always say no balance, no power. You know, he'd always say it to me like no balance, and he had like this crazy Thai accent. I could barely understand him, but he would make it apparent like your head and your foot need to stay on like a pole, like north and south. If this part of the torso goes over, right? The body extends too far, you lose your balance, all your power goes away because all that kinetic energy stays in the body. You can't release it into a trajectory very well. And everything from down here has to try to support all this from up here. And this is heavy. Like your spine, head, and torso and organs and arms, this is a ton of weight for just the ankle and the knee and the foot to try to, and the hip to try to deal with, especially if you're flying into it. Now, most launching kicking techniques, you want to land more internally rotated, and it just naturally happens to your body, right? If you do like remember when Lyoto Machida did the crane kick to Randy Couture, right? Where like he kicked, his foot landed a little more straight, a little more internally rotated, and he didn't do a running start. That's what everyone needs to get through their head. Like when you he basically did a long jump in like track and field. Now, vertical force, you see a lot of basketball players. It's not great technique, but you can get away with it where they'll dunk, right? And they'll come back down on one leg and land just like O'Connor did and recover, and they're just fine. And a lot of people are asking, like, how come I see landings like that all the time with no ACL, but with this one, we do see the ACL? It wasn't drugs. It wasn't because he cheated on his wife. It wasn't because he wasn't in line with religion. It was literally just a terrible idea. It was just a shitty technique at the end of the day. And when you put so much horizontal force into a technique like that, and Connor is a little bit more prone to external rotation, like genetically, like you just see how the way he walks, for whatever, and he's been that way since I've seen him, like before like his first fight, he walks that way. It's just his movement pattern. So he's naturally prone to land into those external positions. That's what his nervous system trusts. That's the safe pattern for him.
I think that's some of the irony of it as well, because Connor's a great mover, right? And so he's worked with Ido Portal. You watch some of the pre-fight hype up videos. They're showing the way that he moves, and he's just got very superior elite movement quality and body control. Really, right? Like even the way when you see Anderson Silva was the same way. When you see somebody that has that type of power where they throw relatively a regular looking punch or a kick and you can just see the life go out of the other guy, right? I used to think like almost like the video game, especially Anderson, he would hit somebody like kind of that Forrest Griffin fight and it was like his meter just went right. You just saw it. What just happened?
Codes.
Yeah, it's just like, wow, this guy's got some real power. Well, that comes from being in the strong angle, right? And that type of training that he's done over the years with his, movement coaches, it really relatively teaches you to be in the strong angle. So that was why I came back to really what you said, just like bad technique, right? Why would he do such a bad technical display of movement and also just pure martial arts? Well, big fight, right?
Right.
Hasn't been back in this fighting one another. Right, a lot of adrenaline. Best guy, another best guy in the world, right? And you want to be able to say that you've prepared for that mentally, but sometimes you're kind of white knuckling it and trying to, do affirmations to yourself to say, I'm ready, I'm ready. But when's the last time you got punched in the face by Max Holloway, right?
Right.
Type of scenario, And so, trying to, and you see it in all of those, even those kicks, he really leans backwards, almost like he's like trying to avoid getting hit while he's trying to over rotate and extend himself in a way that he can't even connect from the position that he's in, right? So it's just why would somebody at his elite level do that, right? And even with the time off, like you can practice. And this is one of the things that we have a hard time with this training business, period, because there's a lot of proxies, right? And just because you can do a pattern or a visual, reactive drill or something like that in training, when you actually get into competition, most of the times it doesn't hold up, or the performance, technically isn't as high. And that's one of the reasons why this ring rust thing is real, because in competition we get into that not maxing, like good looks maxing or whatever you said,
You
right?
get in
Or
the
dragon
maximum.
maxing. We're going to be maxing everything. Um, you're experiencing the max. We need strong angle maxing. Actually, is what we need, right?
Yeah.
Uh, we experience the maxima of maxima, which requires all of that training to happen in that moment of chaos, right? Where the target moves, where the crowd is screaming, where you have the maximum amount on the line, right? And so when we're not really prepared for that, we tend to make mistakes. Right. And that's the moment that you're actually training for, but we're not always thinking about it all the time, especially when we've been out of competition for a long time. It's hard to, even when you've done it for years back, it's hard to replicate that intensity when you haven't experienced it. And so I'm hoping that he's able to. I'm hoping it's just a meniscus tear, small MCL tear or something like that, and so he can get rehabbed up and get back in there.
Yeah. I don't know. I think that ACL is gone. Because I saw that bone, I saw that side of that knee bone poke through the skin, and I was like, boy. And then it was to the point where like he couldn't even put weight on it. Like, like because when you tear the ACL or PCL, like those two bones, like the femur and the tip start knocking, right? And that doesn't feel good.
And the other thing that happens, and so I mean, you're hitting on it well. One of the things that people don't know, and you have to go into your, look it up on Google or whatever. Your ACL is twisted and kind of at a diagonal
Yeah.
positioning, right? And so most of the time, that's why that valgus motion. You see my finger? I still got that bruise from when you were here in
Mm.
March. It's still going away. So the all three forces coming together, where you're getting uh, that valgus with the twisting, right? That almost directly affects the ACL, arguably, right? And so sometimes you can get away with it. Sometimes you can get away with a partial tear, right? But all three of those forces combined. And then the next thing is, and this will be an interesting thing, the way that he landed. So as the bones shift, they come back together and they smack, and you end up basically with a bone contusion. And
Yeah.
so that tends to be actually one of the worst things that nobody talks about, because it can turn into what's called an osteochondral defect, which is basically, if you don't take care of it correctly and you start weight bearing on it too soon, it can turn into basically a pothole. So a lot of the times when we have, a big catastrophic injury like that, you take 6 weeks off, right? You got to do another 6 to whatever, amount months of therapy. And so it's able to heal and you don't have a lot of problems. But sometimes people push it too hard. They try to get back too soon. They try to start loading and doing things that have impact, and then it damages the cartilage. And basically, it's one of those things you can't fix. So, when we're looking at MRIs after injuries like this, a bone contusion is a big deal. And a lot of times people will just be like, oh, yeah, I got a bone contusion, no big deal. And it's really a huge deal. You actually see it a lot in ankle issues, because we don't do surgeries on ankle issues, right? And ankle sprains. An ankle sprain, right? Your ATFL is the same thing as your ACL, basically structurally. And so when you tear your ACL, you become very dysfunctional. But when you tear your ATFL in your ankle, you can still walk around. And
Hmm.
so there you are next week, doing plyos and whatnot, taping your ankle up maybe, or wearing a brace, or maybe even nothing sometimes. But you have this bone contusion that's slowly turning into this thing that's going to end your career, end your even ability to walk correctly. So hopefully hoping for the best, praying for the best for him, because I'd like to see him come back. I think he was really ready. I think that was the other part of this, right? Like I was questioning, he's so successful. How do you get ready to come back to this, right? And to, I think, true to who he is, I think he's really truly like this, hardcore Irish guy that's, the rags to riches story, and he's still got that dog inside of him. I think that's the truth. But again, he's human, right? Number one, you
Hmm.
can't put yourself in the weak angle like that under the maximum maxing, right? And it's really hard to take 5 years off and come back and compete against the best people in the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and there's something to say about that maxima of maxima, or that speed of the sport, right? Is like another term we can kind of think about it, where your body is going to push so much more force when it's live competition than in the training room, and there's no way to truly duplicate that. Because when you're in a training room, the environment is controlled, the adrenaline is down, you can focus on very specific things, and I even experienced that. I remember, like, even it was kind of like a sort of a version of this, not really. I mean, I'm not trying to defeat my own argument, but it's just an example where I remember I took a long break off of jujitsu and I got back in, and the first thing we did was like this, like live, like rolling, right? And we're kind of taking turns, so like all these eyes were on me, and I haven't grappled in forever, right? And so you kind of like feel this pressure. I'm getting back into it. I'm like, I wore like my gym shorts to a gi class on accident. So I had all these like other variables, right? I wanted to make a really good impression. And I remember when I got this guy in side control, he was about to retain his guard. So I like had a body lock, and I flipped my legs up and over his body, almost like a cartwheel to get to the other side control. And I tore the muscles, my endocarsal muscles in my ribs. I felt like this weird, almost like a claw tearing, like a right, and it was just a quick transfer, right? Something my body's had done before, but for some reason I just put so much more force, and my body just wasn't ready for that maximum exertion. It wasn't ready for that speed of sport, that maximum moment, and it just injured me. And you see this happen a lot with guys, right? Especially in amateur MMA, see a lot of guys that go way too hard, way too extended. It's kind of funny. You know what this got me thinking about? Conor got defeated by the one thing that actually made him. Because he was the one to actually get people to overextend. That's how he knocked out Jose Aldo. Because Jose Aldo, he did the same thing. He overextended. He put too much. He got outside of his comfort zone. He put too much force into it. The moment was too great, and Conor took advantage. And now, several years later, Conor falls victim to that same sort of like, I don't want to say rookie mistake. He's not a rookie, but it is kind of like, it's more of a beginner's thing. You see them way overdo it, right? And they hurt themselves or leave themselves vulnerable. So just unfortunate. And I guess
And
at
that's
the
the
end of
thing
the
again.
day,
There's no competitive advantage to it, right? Like that's the
yeah,
problem on both ends, right? So you can't hit the strike the way that you want to, and you're leaving yourself vulnerable to injury. And, again, if Max reacts there, he probably takes Conor down. He may be able to, if Conor stays on his feet and Max circles and gets the angle, he hits him just like Jose Aldo, right? But then you come back to Conor's posturing, it was almost like Conor reflexively knew that he was in the weak angle so bad. He was falling over, right, to stay away from that, being in a
right,
position
leaving himself in a
to
bad
get
spot.
hit. Right, right, exactly.
Yeah. And I will say this, if we want to look at other multifactorial things, that I do think about this a little bit. Connor's heavy right now. Like he is the heaviest he's ever been. Is the most muscle mass you ever seen on his frame. And you mentioned it before, where some of these athletes put on so much muscle that the physics of their body will almost duplicate someone who's like developing obesity. and Connor's a small guy. A lot of people think Connor, he's like 5'9", 5'8". He always walked around 160 to 145 pounds, and now he went up. If you're fighting at 170, that means you're walking around 185, 190. Like, generally speaking, that's a lot of weight.
I can really speak to that, right? Because I'm naturally probably at my best between like 220 and 225, right? But I wrestled 197 my freshman and sophomore year of college, right? In college, we don't have a 215 or a 220 weight class. Even in the Olympics, I can't remember exactly what the weight is, but it's like you're right around 213, somewhere between 210 and 213, I believe. And so I would either be trying to put on mass or lose too much. And this is where I believe that I go back to number one, I never got to compete at my best weight, right? It was always too small or too heavy. And in both scenarios, I think it contributed to the injuries that I had. I was at one point cutting, 30 pounds to get down to 197, right? And then at another point, I'm 262 pounds trying to compete at trying to compete at heavyweight. And the problem was I couldn't keep the weight on. So I'm trying to do all of this, extra weightlifting and all of this, extra eating. I was literally, you remember the old weight gainer? I don't even know if they still sell that.
Whey protein gainer, the freaking
Yeah, but
make you shit your pants.
you had the whey protein, but then you had the whey protein weight gainer. So it had
Yeah,
all the extra
the
sugar
big
and the extra
old
calories.
100% weight. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would literally eat that with my meals, right?
Oh yeah.
And literally, right? And so, but at the same time, I'm training as hard as I would have if I was, trying to cut weight and, trying to be at my best. And I would end up dropping like 20 pounds just from the training. But at the same time, I'm doing all of this stuff to try to keep my weight up to the maximum. And basically, my body's not probably built for 250 pounds or 200 even 40 pounds. Again, I usually feel my best around somewhere between 220 and 225. And so by the time nationals would roll around, every year I was about just a little under 230 and I would feel really good, but my body was beat up from doing all that training with the weight that I had put on. I would have been just better off staying around 225 or 230, type
Hmm.
of scenario. And it was kind of like my body knew that that was the place to be, but in my mind, I needed to be bigger and stronger because I was going up to the next weight class.
Right.
And so yeah, I think that that's a huge factor.
Yeah, you freaking colon maxing with all that whey protein powder and
Sure,
everything.
sure.
The amount of
Yeah.
calories your body has to metabolize, that's hard, man. That's hard on the body.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No matter how much you're training, right, you can only absorb so much. And then, even back then, you don't know, what was I taking? Who knows what was in it and all that type of stuff. So, right.
I used to do
Uh,
that too, man. I used to take that protein powder, I used to mix it with like my oatmeal and cereal and just like stir it up or like and just like get it in any way you can.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Any way that you could, right? And then even sometimes, I would take it without, even mixing it up in anything because I just needed the calories
You would
and
just
it was
dry scoop. Oh, oh,
I was a dry scooper. This tells you a little bit about my personality too. I think everybody's still getting to know me. I was pretty hardcore when I was younger. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It was like whatever you did, whatever the hardest thing was, I was going to do it. So, and especially if anybody was watching back then, when I was in my 20s, like if one of my roommates was there, I'd be like, you know. We used to have this joke. My one teammate would take an onion and just take a bite out of it, right? And so the question was, were you tough enough to eat the onion? Right? We used to joke about it. He was like one of the toughest dudes, and he would do that as like this display of like, look, I'm a little crazier than you, right? You take a bite out of this onion, right?
jeez.
Yeah, this is the college wrestling scene, right?
Yeah,
A
I
bunch
was
of
about to say
together, yeah.
that's some wrestling shit. You don't see that on the freaking baseball team. That's like the only other environment you'll see something like that is either an MMA gym or in the locker room in the Marine Corps. You'll come across some crazy shit like that. Okay. So let's talk about the up squat machine. Now that we've kind of covered the whole Conor McGregor weak angle maxing. So I've been doing this experiment. Is that when I went to Florida, we did some footage and we did some collaborations and some training. And before I left, we made a trade. Right? You wanted to get a hold of a super cat. I brought my super cat over to Florida, and I wanted to get a hold of this new experimental strength machine called the up squat. So we traded machines, right? And I've been using this up squat, like consistently using it for, I think I'm wrapping up week 3 right now. And I've been kind of posting about it. So I've been doing this live experiment because we need more information on this up squat. And basically I have like 2 major issues. One is did I ever tell you how I fucked up my knees?
I think you did, but it'd be probably good for everybody to hear about it.
Yeah. Okay. So I damaged my patella tendons when I was younger, and I also have some sort of imbalance going on, either like my QL, my piriform, something in my right posterior hip that always has been giving me issues, and also like in the hip flexor, I kind of have like this compensating muscle pattern in my right oblique sling and right hip. But I really hurt my knees back when I was this is like 2015, 2016, when I first started learning about a lot of this training methodology. I had this part-time job in between training clients where I would go to different car dealerships and I would hang American flags, right? Because this is Michigan, it's like the big three: GM, Ford, and what's the other one, Chrysler or something like that. And so we would, and they were big into, American made. It's kind of like a thing. You go to Michigan, you're going to come across American cars like crazy. You're going to see American flags at all these dealerships. And I would go there on a cherry picker and I would just zip tie American flags on light poles, right? It was a super easy job. It was long hours. And sometimes, I don't know if you ever counted the light poles in a freaking car dealership. Sometimes it'd be up to 100 fucking light poles and I would have to go up, now, but the truck that I would do was like came up to about like chest level. So it was like 18 plus inches. And I'm first learning about like shock method, right? I'm just getting into this type of training. I'm just getting really excited. And I was like, you know what? I'll get some extra strength in my legs by just dropping off this truck. I'm going to get some depth drops in. Fucking stupid of me didn't realize that there's a limitation to shock method. Like your knees can only take so much, especially and this was before I knew about like athletic assessment, what kind of weaknesses or imbalances I had, and I probably did like, dude, some days I probably did like maybe 100 drops in a single day, right? And I gave myself like bad patella tendonitis on both knees. It just started showing up, and I couldn't figure out what was going wrong, and I've never fully been able to like rehab at 100%. It's always kind of like been there, like it just lingers. And so I've been using this up squat to see if we can fix it, see if we can improve my knees as best I can. Like, because who knows? I could have bone spurs. There could be other things that are going on, like with my patella tendons, that could be limit how healthy they feel. And to fix this imbalance, this sort of hip agitation that I've been dealing with for as long as I can remember. So I'm using this crazy machine called the up squat, right? And there's this whole methodology that you were explaining to me about it, how it relies on a lot of proprioceptive contact points to help the nervous system feel safe. And you're going to give us an explanation. I'm just kind of giving my version of it. But if the nervous system has all these assisted points of contact, right? When you do your squat, your nervous system is more let's use, I'm going to use the word open to incorporating other muscle patterns that aren't the compensating muscle patterns, right? So you can get better, what you've been calling integration. You get better connection and integration with muscle firing, neuromuscular sequencing. So I've been using it, and so far, my results are my knees are at a better baseline. I would say a 10% better baseline consistently. Because before, whenever I bend my knees, I feel like an immediate pain and then it would go away, like through a certain like degree of motion. Now it just feels more like I don't feel any immediate pain. I still feel the pain, but it's a little bit more dull. There's less of an immediate like response at a certain angle, which I'll take as improvement. and my hip is about like, I would say about like 15% better on a baseline as well. It's still there. Even today, I had a ton of carbohydrates yesterday. I went to the county fair and ate a bunch of weird stuff. And so right now, like all my inflammatory spots in my face is so puffy. I can like feel it a little bit more than I usually, but yeah, but usually I can feel it a lot. Sometimes I can feel it travel all the way down to the back of my ankle, like that glute minimus pattern that goes all the way down the leg. I can kind of feel that flare up. And now I just feel like it's more localized, like in the right side of my ass. So why don't you kind of give the viewers a breakdown of like this up squat machine and what my body is going through, kind of tell them like the physiology behind this experiment.
No problem. Yeah, so the first thing that comes to mind is kind of the whole premise of what you just said. And number one, I think, still, I feel like people, whenever ask me these questions, they're like, why are you asking this guy? Who is he like to be this authority on this stuff, right? And it also connects to why we developed this machine, right? So I started out my career becoming a knee specialist. I worked with probably the best PT on knees that nobody really knows, but his name is Bob Mangine. He was at the University of Cincinnati while I was there. He was my main mentor. 2006, had won the Lifetime Achievement Award. And basically, we also worked with Tim Hewitt, who was the big ACL research on why girls tear their ACLs more than boys. Their group published all that research and also how you prevent them, which was with a neuromuscular protocol. And so then, they were combining the idea of, well, here's how you prevent them and here's how you rehab them in kind of one protocol, which is understanding the evaluations and also this idea of this neuromuscular facilitation kind of that you were talking about. And so, it just changed the trajectory of my career. I was talking to somebody about this the other day because if you can really understand the ACL and also the patellofemoral mechanics that are going on with it, because that's usually the problem. Patellar tendonitis is usually your main problem after you have an ACL surgery, particularly the one that's controllable that you're trying to prevent. So if you have an ACL surgery and you go to somebody that doesn't quite understand the patellofemoral mechanics, you're probably not going to get the best rehab when you go to them. And again, a lot of people that are physical therapists or rehab specialists are typically working with knee replacements and non-sports injuries a lot of the time. And so they don't always have to dive in as deep on patellar tendonitis. And why am I getting to this, right? Number one, maybe if you would have been another 10 years younger and you're 16 or 18 instead of being 25 or 26, you might have been able to do more of those depth drop jumps and whatnot and handled it. But at 26, your body's now starting to change as well. You're starting to get a little a little old, not really, but all the growth plates have changed and are now closed, and your body's now fully an adult. And so those patellar tendons are going to get beat up. You're bigger, you're heavier, all those things that we were just talking about, with Conor, right? And you're, progressively starting to, lose some of that just natural little kid elasticity and, fluidity in your joints, right? So again, I'm trying to kind of building up to this. And so our issue is, well, we know we need strong, healthy, explosive, powerful legs from the spectrum of I just need to sit down and stand up from a chair and walk up the stairs and maybe go up the hill to get my mail out of the mailbox type of scenario versus being able to be a high level performing athlete. And with strong, healthy, explosive, powerful legs and the way that we train them comes with a cost. And typically that cost ends up basically affecting somebody's knees or their lower back. It's almost guaranteed that if you talk to anybody that's trained their legs for any consistent period of time, that they end up with some type of knee problem or some type of back problem. Sometimes it's unknowing, on their end, they're unaware that their training was actually causing their problem. And a lot of that training actually makes you more quad dominant, and more quad dominance pushes you to put more forces into your patella, which again, when you're jumping off of something and landing bending in it, you really need to use your hips to absorb. And so, and sometimes people already have that dominance pattern, just naturally. Then we add, kind of, I don't want to say bad training, but not as targeted, focused training on it, on top of it. And it actually just makes you dump more forces into that leaky part of your chain,
Mhm.
right? So this also goes back to, I was thinking about this last night because I've been thinking a lot about more of the orthodox kind of traditional training, and why I believe the up squat belongs. Why do I think it's better than some of the other things? And, we have barbell squatting and zerchers and, belt squats and all these different varieties, deadlifts as well. And really, we're trying to get to, again, having a more expressive body that functions better and breaks down less, right? So that's really the goal. So how do we really do that? Well, in a lot of these other ways, they're just basically designed to overstress the body in some situation that doesn't allow you to have that most functional, resilient body. And it's because we're mechanically dumping people into the weak angle. So the machine was designed to do the opposite. Like you'd already said it so well. It's designed to put you in the strong angle, but not lock you in. And I think that's probably one of the things that people miss. And you could probably, testify to that as well, because I think what people see sometimes, they think that the knee is actually locked in place, but it's not. It's just being guided by those proprioceptive contacts with the knee pad in the front and the seat in the back. So now your brain knows where all these touch points are on the machine, so it can better integrate and create, like, a lot of guys from these systems, the nervous system training stuff, intermuscular coordination and muscular equilibrium, which then almost kind of in a way that you think about this is, if all of your muscles are working correctly, it's almost like an anti-gravity effect, where now the body is naturally being aligned. The joints are able to be in that, what we call joint centration. You don't have as much shear force to deal with, and we can talk about partially why that is too. And so now your muscles, as they're firing, are able to pull your body, almost pull it apart, and allow you to be more buoyant, almost like that little kid version of yourself that had all these, all this fluidity in your joints. And that could be a whole nother, dissertation on it. Yeah. So, what are your thoughts on what I said so far? I know there's more to it, but I don't want to keep blabbing.
Yeah, yeah. So what I think about the most when I use this machine is that, how, for one, I don't really feel any knee pain in these exercises. Now I'll feel some slight agitation at certain angles, but before, okay, so if I'm just standing, but how it used to feel before without the machine, right? And I bend my knees a little. I was even showing you this, like in the weight room. I bend my knees, right? When I get in that quarter flex position, I immediately kind of feel like this little dose of pain would kind of hit, and then it would go away. When I'm in this up squat, I actually don't feel anything agitating until I start getting closer to this weak angle. And for some of the people who are still learning this concept, basically as I get lower into my squat, it starts to feel more uncomfortable on my knees, right? And I just lift the seat up just a couple notches, right? And now I stay within a range of motion that's non-agitating. So that's the first thing. So it allows me to train my legs and my knees and do any therapy process, restorative process, or strength process without agitating the shit out of the nerve endings, right? It's another thing, like, if you do something and it hurts, the next day it would always feel hotter, it would feel more inflamed. I'm just irritating the shit out of that spot, and that's like, it feels just counterproductive, right? I feel like I'm not making any progress.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so you're kind of taking me back to where I was trying to go. A lot of people are just not naturally built very well to do traditional weightlifting. Arguably, from some of the research I'm trying to do right now on anthropomorphics or pometrics, which is measuring your body, like, how long is your forearm relative to your shoulder? Same thing. How long is your femur relative to your tibia? Those things. So ideally, basically about 80% of the population doesn't have the best mechanics for traditional weak angle weightlifting type of scenario, which means that you're probably going to dump force into your knees and into your lower back. Well, again, just in general, we know knee problems. One out of two people, 50% of people are going to develop knee arthritis in their lifetime, right? So the knees take a lot of the brunt of our forces of our body. And that's one of the reasons why we say the knee is the key, because we know that if we can stabilize the knee, that just about everything else up the chain, kind of coming back to Conor's issue, right? Everything up the chain was not in alignment. So when he landed, the knee can't absorb the force, right? So same thing happens if we malposition or misalign the knee, then everything else has to be off as well. So where this concept, we always like to go to the foot, but what we've really seen, and even in my research when I was at the University of Cincinnati, that as long as the knee stays stable, then the foot's not going to be able to tell the knee what to do. And it's actually kind of like what you were saying before. You almost want to go to, well, if the foot is flat or it goes into valgus, that automatically that's going to cause problems up the chain. But it's not necessarily true, because if the chain can organize itself above the knee relative to the base of support, the knee is still going to be able to transfer those forces.
Mhm.
And so this also comes back to where I was going, Mike Maddox and a lot of this development of leg strengthening apparatuses and machines and exercises and corrective exercises. If you really think about it, like we have such a complexity and diverse array of attacking this problem of, I just want to have strong, healthy, functioning legs, right? If you go online right now, I would bet you close to 30% of the fitness videos out there, training or whatever, have something to do with how problematic it is trying to strengthen people's legs, because there's 10 ways to do it wrong. There's 10 ways to do it right.
Mhm.
There's 5 ways that don't transfer. There's 5 ways that do transfer. How are you going to start adding in Biomechanics? How are you going to add programming? All these things that we get into. And we just kind of realized, again, with the ISO machines and the up squat, or the uh, the ice machines and the supercat particularly, right? They were designed to try to allow you to work a specific functional pattern, versus looking at doing barbell lifting, as an example. And even Barney Fuller on the supercat, they realized that it didn't make as much sense to do jumping exercises with barbells or dumbbells in your hands. Let's make a machine that allows you to have better body mechanics and a better pattern ultimately. And so over time, Mike, and even with my input, we realized that it still doesn't necessarily integrate your mechanics the way that we want to see, so you're not having forces leaking into the knees or into the lower back particularly. Well, why? So again, I don't know what your training history is. I don't know, again, everybody has a little bit of different genetics. And so we have these different compensation patterns. And so just any type of exercise that I do, if I don't correct that compensation pattern, you're just going to keep doing it over and over again. Right. So now if I give you a way to do more volume, again, like you're talking about jumping off the back of the truck, you're doing more volume thinking, yeah, this is better, but you're just leaking into the weak angle, and you're doing something that's, high impact. So this is what you're saying. It was actually my first kind of understanding really of the weak angle, and like what we've been talking about a little bit in the past with we want to be able to 1-inch punch, right? This dynamic strength index, this ability to rapidly switch directions and create force, right? In the switch. And so when you see somebody hang clean or power clean, for example, is the easiest thing. Instead of them dropping and catching the weight, they will catch the weight and then their quads engage really hard, right? And you can see it, and it ends up being a double movement. So they'll clean, boom, they catch, right? And as they catch, their quads go, and you can see it happen, and then their butt drops a little bit. So the quads fire to decelerate them instead of using their hips to decelerate them and then come back and switch directions. And so that's largely what ends up happening and what you call quad dominance, right?
Mhm.
That's actually what's happening. And so I think we have a misconception a lot of times of what quad dominance is, and it basically is a fragmentation instead of an integration. When the body's integrated, it can move in a sequence where all the muscles are in equilibrium instead of one muscle group firing overfiring or over activating or over dominating the pattern. So when you use the up squat, it gives you the framework or the scaffolding to allow you to go through more of a relaxed and better sequence, so you can keep working through that pattern. Now, on your end, and I mentioned this to you the other night when we were talking. Like, one of the best things about it, because we keep talking about who's this for? Where's the research at? How does this line up? How much force am I producing? And the thing that I came to from the very beginning, especially when I got this, and if you look at the old videos on my YouTube channel, almost everybody that's in those videos had some type of knee surgery or knee pain that they were dealing with. And they went from being able to do, like, not being able to go up and down the stairs because they had pain in their knees, or just daily activity they weren't able to do, let alone exercising. So then all of a sudden we're putting them in this machine and they're doing 100, 200, 300 reps, sometimes under resistance on the first day, right? And they're going, what is happening to me? I can't understand. How am I exercising my legs without having pain in my knees? Right? This
Mhm.
has been going on for a year. This has been going on for 5 years. They're telling me I need to have a knee replacement. How is this possible? Right? When you come back to it, when you put the body, and you said this already, I'm going to just put the stamp on it. When you put the body in a position of safety and alignment, you give it the contact points that it needs, and you allow it to go through the natural sequencing. Those pain mechanisms and protective mechanisms are able to go off. Now, to end it, the big problem with this is, and you were alluding to it, and there's research on this, that basically the connective tissue structures and the bone get more sensitive to pain the more pain that you have. So the
Yeah.
more of a painful movement that you have, the body keeps kind of going into this protective survival response where you get more substance P, you get more free nociceptive nerve endings that are growing in the area. So it's going to send a faster response back to your brain. And just like the Hebbian principle, the nerves that fire together wire together. So now your pain nerves are also going on this basically sequence that now you're actually creating as almost like a reflex mechanism that's getting burned into your nervous system.
What are
Sorry, I
the
know
name
that
of
was
those
super
nerve
long.
endings? What were the name of
That
those nerve that you said the
So, yeah,
crazy
so no, nociceptive just means
noci?
pain sensitive. Yeah. So if you think proprioceptive, right, it's septive, right? That word means like awareness or sensation, right? And so noci means pain. So you have free nerve endings, particularly that are the ones that sense pain, and it's all there's. I could go in a whole thing. Like, one of the
Yes.
things we were talking about yesterday is it fast twitch muscle fiber and or not. And I said, well, you got to realize too, some nerves are actually faster than the others. And a lot of people don't realize that. And so you have different nerve types basically. And so again, this nervous system stuff is fascinating, and it's actually relatively complex, right? We don't have to start tearing that one down. But again, you get more sensitive to the pain, and those reflex mechanisms start getting burnt in. And when that happens, it's a vicious cycle, right? You
Right.
literally it creates inhibition in your muscle firing patterns, to the point where, again, like I don't know if you said this, somebody else said this about even maybe Connor, or like when we were talking about the patellar tendon and Achilles tendon ruptures, a high percentage of them show pathology that was already being developed before the injury happened. So a lot of the times there's an ongoing issue that people are dealing with, and maybe it is a little bit of discomfort with squatting and leg exercises, and you're just blowing it off because, hey, you know what? Everybody gets pain in their knees when they're trying to strengthen their legs. You got to break a few eggs to make an omelet, right? Well,
Mm.
yeah. When you don't understand the strong angle, that's what happens. And again, now I'm going to come back to you. You take all of that, and now you've been super catting and cone drilling and plyo hopping and all of this stuff after you were smashing your knees jumping off of that truck,
No.
right? With this pattern and trying to overcome it, but you're actually just driving it in deeper. And it's going to take a little bit of time for you to fully unwind that pattern, with using the up squat. But we were talking about this last night. I'm looking for 6 to 8 weeks from now. Like, it's going to be pretty interesting as you stay consistent, because your strong angle is going to start becoming like a piece of steel, like Mike Maddox says.
Yeah. So here's the interesting sort of like pattern that I noticed with my body, because I always try to find the involuntary movements more than the voluntary movements. To me, that's more of a sign to benchmark what my body's going through.
And
So
just for clarity, I think maybe somebody listening, what do you mean by that? I just want to make sure that we're on the same page.
so like involuntary movements. So one thing that I do to kind of stairs is a really good passive way to judge what's going on with your legs, going up and down stairs, right? Because we all do it. We do it so many times. We know what it feels like. And you can also watch your leg behavior, because your legs will do things autonomously. We'll find patterns and we'll find ways to get through resistance as efficient and as safe as possible. And like you said, to avoid that agitation, that what's the word of those, that nerve response? I want to remember this word.
Nociceptive.
Nociceptive. Thank you, doctor. By the way, shod and unshod, I looked it up. Comes from horses, by the way.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they'd be like, yeah, they would go to the blacksmith. We need our horses fed and shod, please.
There you
Yeah,
go. That makes sense. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Little
the
fun
other
fact.
the other thing you're talking about is what we would call an antalgic pattern, right? So it's anti-pain,
Ouch.
antalgic, right? And so that's what a limp is, right? And so in a limping pattern, and you said your legs will try to figure something out autonomously, but it's really your whole body reacting, right? And
Yeah,
so even like on Connor's landing, like we were talking about, it's like the biggest expression of a limp, where the foot is away from the center of gravity, the head shifts away, right? And then you can't switch directions. And that's basically, it's the same thing that people do when they limp. They're trying to unload the limb, but it still has to load at the same time. So again, coming off of a rehab, you have to make sure that you fix that, because it'll actually cause somebody to get an injury like Connor did. So,
Mhm.
and again, like that's also another thing that I thought of, like, did he have a full rehab really? Right. And ultimately I'm a little biased. Without me looking at him, I would always probably say, no, he didn't. But there were probably some, missing, chinks in the armor, or whatever you want to say, so
Sure. Yeah. So I want to touch on that counter thing, but I also want to get my
yeah,
point to this.
took us off. Yeah.
No, it's all right. Go down the stairs sideways, and they let their like TFL take that shear force. And sometimes I'll do that. My first step will be a little sideways, right? And it's just natural. And sometimes I think about it, I'm like, okay, I'm compensating. And sometimes I don't think about it. But lately, I've just been noticing I go down the stairs like 4 foot first without like any internal rotation of that first leg, and it's just been happening naturally. And then when I go down the stairs, like the guarding sensation, like I almost like get like flashbacks, like I feel like my spine and my brain like reminding me, like, hey, look out, this usually hurts. This usually creates like that God damn it, I can't remember that word. I want to keep that
Nociceptive.
to keep that nociceptive response like active. But I notice like my feet are going down a little straighter. It feels more comfortable. I feel like I can absorb the force, especially going down the stairs. That's how you really know what's going on like with your body, is how you go down and accept eccentric force. So that's one thing I'm noticing. My knees are hurting a lot less. I still have a ways to go, but I'm noticing like these small improvements, and I'll take an inch, right? I'll take anything at this point, because one thing about when when you're dealing with this recurring agitation, right, and you're constantly inflaming these nerves, and you try to train through it anyway, that puts a toll on your brain, and it kills your morale. Like to the point where some days I used to just not even want to train, because I just don't want to feel my knees hurting anymore. And that's another thing you got to think about, like the I don't know if it's like a mental health thing, but that's a real thing where, like, if it's gonna hurt, if like to go through this exercise, and even if you think it's gonna help you later, your body just doesn't want to feel it, right? And you don't put a ton of energy into it. You're a little safer at the end of the training session. You almost feel like you got worse. right? And it creates like that vicious cycle that you're talking about. And on this up squat, it's like the first time I've really been able to train, even on the isokinetic. I remember when I got on your isokinetic accelerator, I was like, this is it. Like, this is gonna feel amazing. I remember thinking like this is gonna feel much better on my knees than the super cat. And as soon as I went through the motion, I was like, ow, that hurt. I'm like, damn it. I was like, oh, it's still there, right? And even with some adjustment of my pelvis, it felt better, but it just I was like, God, it's still there. And I remember thinking in my head, like, okay, now what? And then you immediately got me from that machine and you got me to the up squat. And you knew what you were doing.
I was setting you up, yeah.
Yeah, you were making me take the strong angle red pill. Right?
Yeah.
You're like bringing me through like Morpheus. You just like already knew where this was going. And then like I went on the up squat machine, I did a couple reps and I immediately felt my knees and I'm like shit, it doesn't hurt anymore, right? Or did it nearly hurt as bad? It was like super super tolerable, right? Still there, you can still tell there's not something right, but it wasn't like shocking my system, right? It was an immediate protective like painful signal. And another thing is my knees didn't feel hot after a couple of those sets. Usually my knees will always feel hot to the touch after I just did some sort of leg strengthening exercise, right? And this one, like the patellar still felt cold, right? That's a really good response. And as I'm doing more of this up squat exercise, right, I'm actually starting to feel my glutes working, right? Even though I'm not feeling, it's kind of a weird response. Maybe you explain this. I only feel my glutes working after the exercise is over, right? After I do all my sets and I walk away from the machine. Usually I'll take a walk around my neighborhood, just kind of like reset the hips and also want to get my kinesthetic awareness, like feel what's happening. But as I'm walking, I'll feel like weird sections of my core kind of pumped up. I'll feel like weird sections of like my glutes, right? And it almost feel like kind of tingly in a way. And as I'm doing the exercises, I don't really feel it at all. And that's one thing that's kind of fascinating because we're so conditioned, like it's gotta burn like right in my freaking ass. That's how I know it's working. And I've done barbell hip thrusts. I've done a lot. I've done single leg RDLs. I've done kickbacks on the super. I've done a lot of posterior hip work, right? And I've never gotten that tingling sensation in my glutes before, like this up squat machine, or in my core like all these barbell freaking saviors, these guys who are so attached to the barbell, right? They always make the argument that the barbell really helps with core strength, and I'm like, does it? Is
Yeah.
that why we're all strapping belts around us so we can deactivate the core and compress like the lumbar? So are you sure it's you were training our core, right? Because this one, I'm feeling it in my obliques. Like, how the fuck are you feeling it in your obliques and I'm just squatting? So why don't you give the good people an explanation?
Yeah, so man, you just hit so many things there. So number one, Connor's injury, off balance, weak ankle, misalignment, right? Barbells. What do they really do? They're really challenging our balance, right? I talked about this another time with you. Why is the barbell so long, right? Whatever, whoever designed it, whatever, you got to be able to put a bunch of weight on it. But that first part of it is balancing it, right? So anytime that we have to do anything with balance, our nervous system has to use a ton of resources to try to just make us stay balanced. So initially, in this principle of initial gains, when you're doing balance exercises or using a barbell or really even any type of weight, as soon as you grab a weight, it's throwing you off balance and your nervous system is going, how do I stay balanced while I am carrying this load or holding this weight or whatever? And we just don't think about that part, right? To do that, the nervous system will figure out whatever it has to do. And the research will show that basically the force at both ends of the barbell can be even, but the person underneath of it can be favoring anywhere from 13 to 21% for their side dominance on one leg. But yet they're able to create symmetrical forces at the end of the barbell. So that tells you they're keeping the barbell balanced, but they're imbalanced as the pivot point in the
Right,
middle,
because
right?
it's
As
a threat.
the
The
forward.
barbell's like threatening their body.
Right. So they just have to figure out how to do it. So then they figure out how to balance, and then they're working through this pattern to be able to stay balanced. Well, you keep getting better and better balance, but then you keep increasing more and more load to try to throw yourself more and more off balance. Right. And so you get better at just balancing that weight versus moving through the correct pattern. And then that's, we've talked before where all the diminishing returns come in. So now if you look at, again, back to Conor's injury, and the non-contact injury, villains, the weak angle villains of side dominance, quad dominance, trunk dominance, and ligament dominance, they're all a representation of fragmentation, which basically means that the upper body and lower body are not staying connected. You could go to ambikinetic, all four limbs. Something's breaking, right, and separating. The opposite is integration. Right. And so the opposite is a natural balance. So when we have natural, really athletic movement, somebody was talking about Barry Sanders yesterday. You watch him, Mike Tyson, in these coiling and cutting motions that they do, their body stays integrated and they go doom doing, right? And they just seem to, levitate off into a different direction. And so in those fragmented patterns for the dominance issues, we only look at those really to people that are having an injury, right? We think non-contact injury, but they're also the problem with overuse in these pathomechanics that we have. It's the same fragmentation, right? So you may not develop an ACL rupture, right? But it doesn't necessarily mean that your knees aren't taking abnormal forces when you're doing the movements that you're doing, because you still have this fragmentation dominance pattern of quad dominance or ligament dominance. So then you get into the machine and that all goes away. Now you're integrated. Right. And now the body's able to organize itself in a way that, again, your muscle equilibrium is more naturalized to allow you to just move through a pattern literally the way that you did when you were younger. Help me get back on track here. My mind's going in a million directions here.
Hold on. I don't know what's going on. I use the bathroom again. I drink way too much.
You drink too much. Yeah. Maybe I'll get my mind right when you come back.
Freaking bladder vaccine over here.
Feel better?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if you go ahead.
You got your thoughts?
Yeah, I got my thought.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you look at the basically this idea of a controlled chaos continuum, right? We have better balance when we have better control, right? When we go into chaos, that's when things are designed to throw us off balance. Again, coming back to Conor's trying to throw this kick against a moving target, right? That's more chaos. It's harder to stay organized in that situation, right? So our big problem we have, and again, if you look through the research on this, it's pretty clear. Yeah, if I give you more supports, I lay you down on your back and have you do an exercise, you feel safer. You usually can express it better. It's better for a rehab situation. And again, a lot of our solutions like belt squats, particularly, would be another one. Is that you're changing the environment or changing the load to express force through a segment of the body instead of having it fully integrated, because you're trying to avoid axial loading because you know somebody can't handle those forces in that chaotic situation because they can't balance. Well, what does a belt squat help you do? It helps you balance, and it also gives you a way to load the body segmentally so you can get force into the legs, but you're not necessarily challenging the whole body or the trunk. right? And so now when we go to a barbell example, or plyos or whatever, that's way more chaos. Your body has to figure out how to balance itself and organize itself in those positions. And if you're already misaligned, if you already have these dominance patterns, you're just going to express them more. So now when we come back to like Hatfield squats, for example, where we use a safety bar and hold on to the squat rack or the barbell, we know that that also improves balance, but you still see a really high force expression and strength gains. And also even biomechanically, they stay in a better position, especially athletically. Now we also come back to where do we see the most functional transfer, in weightlifting type of exercises and studies, right? Hex bar deadlifts, step ups, Zerchers maybe even as well, because we're trying to centralize the load. So when we centralize the load, even when we tell somebody coming back from a back pain issue on how to pick something up, we always tell them to put it close to the body, right? Even for a reaching movement, for a shoulder issue, right?
Yeah.
Close to the body, right? Because now my body can balance better. I can have better integration. Well, even with all of that, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that your knee is not going to leak, or your side dominance is not going to kick in, or your ligament dominance is not going to kick in. So we have kind of the best of both worlds. Again, when we talk about holding on to something, we call in physical therapy, we call that partial weight bearing. So in the most controlled scenario, we're going to go non-weight bearing, right? We're going to have you laying on your back doing like you do. I've seen you do those seated straight leg raises, right? You're laying on the ground. Again, you have all these contact points, your hands, your hips, right? Your other legs on the ground, so you can balance with all of that. Now, if I have you stand up and stand on one leg and do a straight leg raise, you have to keep your trunk. Everything's got to stay in alignment, because you don't have the contact points to help you balance. Now you are in full weight bearing on one leg, right? So we just took you from maximum control to maximum chaos. Now let's do it while you're jumping and swinging your leg and moving your trunk at the same time. And let's rotate, right? Chaos, right? Now you throw Conor into the scenario, right? And you go, people screaming, and it's the live event and all this stuff, right? And so now we're doing the most chaotic thing, and he gets hurt. Well, you come back to our machine, we have this beautiful blend of being able to load the body and give it some instability, just enough that the person can stay organized, but they're still partial weight bearing, so they still have enough contact that it helps them with integrating their body in becoming more stable, so they can also go through that pattern. And partially coming back to all of this, the nervous system goes, oh, simple, this is easy, this is safe, I can produce more force because I have better balance in this scenario. Now, again, when we take people and put them into too much balance, they can't actually, if they're too stiff or too integrated, now they can't relax enough to create the force that they need to, or they're dependent upon the brace that they're wearing, for example, right? And now that brace is actually stopping them from doing the correct movement. But we need that maximum stability there, because we need to protect it while it's healing. And we can even do some strengthening things with that brace on, but eventually we have to take it off. And when we do that, we usually move people into partial weight bearing, right? Well, the problem with partial weight bearing is typically it doesn't transfer over to the chaos, right? But we have this, and this is the whole system, that we have, and this really comes back to the strong angle. If we can put you in the strong angle, give you the contacts and the supports that you need, and basically do something to facilitate the pattern, even on the ISO accelerator, it's teaching you rate of force production, right? But it's not necessarily teaching you how to organize your body 100%. So we go, okay, let's put you on the up squat. That's going to do that. So when we move you over to the supercat or to the accelerator machines, you're going to be able to be better at expressing that force and having less likely to repetitively leak in your chain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I hope that all.
yeah, you know what? There's like a weird sort of like a analogy, or I don't even know if it's an analogy, but my brain keeps thinking about this when I use the up squat. It's almost like I'm smoothing out the foundation again. I'm getting rid of like these little imperfections, like a piece of drywall or something like that. And that's one thing I can actually like feel it in my lower body. Like the movement feels smoother, smooth, slow is smooth and smooth is fast. There's something about that philosophy that I don't know exactly like the physiology behind it, but I can sense it happening in my body, right? And now I haven't done any hard quality testing. Because for one, I can't do a vertical jump in my garage because I'll hit my head on the ceiling because I just
That's
jumped that high.
your vertical's so good.
It's so good, whatever, bro. It's like, what can I say? No, but I do want to actually test my broad jump just so we have something quantifiable, just for fun. Just see what it's like because I don't really care about hard qualities. I don't think they really contribute, in my opinion, contribute that much to actually winning games. But people would like to see it, and I think it'd be a fun little addition to the training process. But you know what else I really think about? I think about what percentage of the population can't strengthen their legs because they have dysfunction? And I'm talking about like people with MS, people with severe anterior pelvic tilt or something like that, people former knee surgeries, the elderly, paralysis, all
Tall,
sorts of conditions.
tall people, right? Just really
Really
tall
tall
people.
people like
And
LeBron, LeBron, like dude, like anyone who has knee issues, like this machine, like allows you to access leg strength again, right? In a way that doesn't hurt, that feels safe, that's transferable, So that's what I think about the most because I think about like my mom who's had like two knee surgeries. She's very quad dominant. She's a lot older, right? And it's hard for her to strengthen her legs. And I'm going to be getting her on this machine. And now this is a way because leg strength. You lose your leg strength as you get older. That is the number one killer in human beings is a loss of leg strength. Because when you lose your leg strength, you lose your reactivity and proprioceptive responses. And what happens when those start to go when you're older? You fall. Yeah, you fall and you land on your pelvis. And usually the pelvis is so deconditioned, the bones are you're so old, it can create a break, it can create an injury. Now you're totally immobilized and that it basically like a house of cards. That's really what takes people out. So many people uh pass away because of falls, right? As they're older.
so if you think about it, right, it's a fear of falling and it's a fear of dropping. And so on two ends, the person starts having fear avoidance. They stop going up and down the stairs. They stop doing certain things. They stop going to jujitsu. They stop running. They stop doing these things because they just reach a point where they're tired of dealing with the pain, right? Mentally as well. And then when you fall, you're supposed to drop like that little baby because you're not worried about hitting the ground, right? Because you're like, oh, I've already fallen a bunch of times. I can control this. Well, again, that quad dominance kicks in, for example, right? And so when you go to fall, the body stiffens and then you keep falling, right? And then you get hurt instead of being able to relax. Right. And that's the challenge that we have again when you come back to our traditional leg strengthening, right? We need to be able to relax in the switch and then be able to explosively change direction. So, and this comes back to even the super cat. I mean, you can overload it and basically decay that amortization phase where now you're just basically doing a fast isotonic and you're not really getting that plyometric, stretch shortening cycle amortization where you want it to be because it's just decaying because your body can't switch directions as efficiently. And that goes for everything, right? And even the supercat gives you a little bit of better sense of balance, which allows you to be able to do those things more safely. But it doesn't necessarily force that. So again, coming back to what you're saying, I think you have the pain of people having real pain and the risk of people falling and not being able to just have good quality of life and longevity. But it's exactly the same thing for athletes as well, right? The same thing that kills the person. My brother would always say this: athletes die twice, right? Our career ends as an athlete and it's over, and we have to accept that. There's like a death, dying, and bereavement process that goes through that. How many have had to end their careers early because they didn't have the correct leg strengthening stuff going on for the problems that they're
Rashad
having,
Evans.
right? I mean, yeah, there's just the list. It's like
Yeah.
all these people become a statistic, right? And again, you get one of these injuries And now also you are, and this is something that we've been talking about, you and I, right? Like, is this machine going to eliminate the prehab corrective exercise exhaustion that everybody has to do to keep foam rolling and hip exercises and clams and all of these things? Well, I believe it's definitely going to reduce a lot of the need for that, because if your body's more integrated, you don't need to keep working on all of this isolated, extra corrective stuff to try to get your body to be reintegrated. I mean, that's literally what you're doing, but you're piecemealing it together instead of actually solving the problem that's causing it in the first place, right? And it's that Einstein quote: you can't solve a problem that was created by the same level of thinking that created it. Something like that. I'm sure I just butchered that, right? But you have to think differently. So if the goal is integration and integrity under demand, right? Why don't we start with that from the beginning? Well, instead we start with fragmentation, right? Well, let's strengthen this glute, let's stretch this IT band, let's stretch this hamstring, right? Let's do this balance exercise, but it never really gets to the point where you're fully integrating the body. And most of the time the problem is the knee can't stay stable while you're doing these things, because that's where your dominance pattern really manifests.
Yeah, and that's what you've been teaching me is we're trying to fix the knee with a weak angle philosophy, right? Instead of taking like a strong angle philosophy, like a philosophy where you actually get kind of leverage. And that is interesting paradigm shift to go through. Like if you always start with fragmentation, or let's just stay on the barbell just because it's just such a clear example. If you're always trying to use, I always tell people like you're trying to use this tool to fix a problem that the tool is kind of making worse. But if you start with that, it's like when you grow up and like if you've never been to a third world country, you have no idea. Like it's not a part of your reality. You have no reference. You know nothing outside of that. So a lot of these athletes and coaches and the training philosophy, even the studies, all have a lot of these tools that are already causing the problem without them realizing it. They're already in a weak angle with their thinking, right? And that's why I tell people because some people get so mad at me because like I criticize barbells, right? And I just tell them like guys, like barbells is not, you are not a barbell. It's just a tool you can use. I just don't like using that tool for strengthening the legs. I like using other tools, tools that incorporate more integration, tools that have less issues. I want to be in a stronger angle with my thinking and with my training. That's all it is. It has nothing to do with like any individual person. Sorry, a little side note, because a lot of people, like you said, like a lot of people like want to feel confident. They don't want to feel like they're making a mistake with their profession or with their athletes. But you've been bringing this up, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of research, and not a lot of these strength coaches or these personal trainers are aware of this research because a lot of this research happens in the world of physical therapy. The physical therapy world, you guys are known about this. It has been known for a while. That information just doesn't really leave that world and get into the general public, very
Not
often.
a theory.
Yeah. It's just the way it happens. It's like the it's kind of funny because actually the Soviets, this is what broke their model later on, is that the Soviets were starting to develop this problem in the 80s. This is why their sports machine engine and basically the whole government fell apart. Because as more mistakes were happening, and as they were able to develop less and less money, right? Because their economy was essentially failing. They were in a weak angle as a foundational level with their system of government. Because when you have a situation where you can't criticize, information is shared less, some mistakes are happening, and instead of trying to solve the problem, you kind of just blame the problem, right? They kind of got into this crazy feedback loop where all these departments were now fragmenting away from each other. Like Chernobyl is a good example, where you have like the nuclear engineering department couldn't communicate with the energy the energy corporations, who wasn't communicating with the nuclear scientists, who wasn't communicating back with the engineer, because they didn't want them discussing mistakes, because then someone has to go to jail, right? They're just weak angle maxing the shit out of the system, and it's becoming more and more fragmenting. So when worlds are not sharing information, they kind of stay in their own little hub, and then people start making up their own ideas because they don't know what else to think, right? And that's
Getting feedback because it's not
yeah
connecting.
yeah they're not getting.
Not getting they're not getting proprioception. So that's like this is why I'm smiling so much. I want to do a little dance in my seat because this is what I've been writing about, right? Like it's not just physical, right? It's not just biomechanics. It's how
It's
biology and
philosophical.
physics, right? It's everything, right? This is a universal principle of functionality and execution.
Yeah, because of gravity. We'll get into that later. And we're really, yeah, it's really everything comes back to gravity. Gravity is the governor of all things. But the point that I'm trying to make is that this I'm just trying to paint a picture for people to why we're with our current system of training, we're in a very similar position that the Soviets fell in, where now information is fragmented and non-shared. Right. And that's why we're doing this podcast, because we're trying to bridge this gap. And that's why you have all these different conflicting philosophies of strength training. And you got this guy saying this is wrong, and you got this guy friggin' swearing at me in my DMs, like, like insulting me because he thinks, sorry, right? Because they think that I'm a liar or I'm deceptive. But there's so much information out there where, like, your average personal trainer, average coach just isn't getting it, right? They're not getting it. And a lot of us are weak angle thinking out of our freaking mind. And I'm a little part of the problem. We're going to social media for research instead of actually going to like databases and published work. And honestly, I think I blame the school systems. Maybe they just didn't teach us to do it, or it's too hard.
True.
It might be hard to go, because I don't know if anyone's ever read a published paper about like exercise science. I have to get ChatGPT to reteach this back to me, because sometimes I read it and I'm like, what did I just read? Like, I don't like it's hard to kind of comprehend a lot of information, especially if you're not conditioned to do it. Like, and that's also why I like learning from you, because you're kind of like my filter, to take something really complex and scientific, and you can kind of bring it into like a more of like a baseline understanding, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a doctoral level of thinking in all of this stuff, right? And there's the highest level of a unique body of knowledge tends to have a doctorate behind it, right? And this is one of the reasons why we have such a challenge with health, wellness, and fitness in general, is because there's a doctoral level of information, and basically it's not disseminated out there. Like you're saying, it's all in silos, right? It's all fragmented. And basically again, as us as doctoring level practitioners, we have a fiduciary responsibility to communicate this stuff well. So we're super trained on what you were just talking about. And I don't know if I told you this story or not. It's probably like really one of the most formative maybe moments in my career, even when I was having the conversation. So I was doing my exit interview after my residency at the University of Cincinnati, and one of the parts of the story is from basically 2003 to 2007 ish was when YouTube and Wikipedia and all this
Yeah.
stuff was starting to come out, right? And at the University of Cincinnati, I went from Gannon University to the University of Cincinnati. Gannon was still a little bit behind, Division II school, small Catholic school, right? Didn't have much of a research component to the whole university, right? So now I go to the University of Cincinnati, which is a huge research school, all these PhDs in chemical engineering and different physiology and all this stuff, and I have access to the university library, and everything had just came online where they were putting all the research articles for everything that you could ever ask, and all you had to do is click a button. So 1 year before this, hardly any access. Another year later, high speed internet, and here I am in this program, right? Being able to read every article that I ever wanted, and I'm in a program where I have to, right? And like that was a part of it. And I'm conducting research. So at the end, I have an exit interview with the head guys from the American Physical Therapy Association. They come in and asking you all these questions, and they're, well, what are you going to do after this? Are you going to go for this thing or that thing? And I said, well, I'll probably do whatever I want. I learned how to be a doctor. right? I learned how to basically, look at information and have an information diet and go, this is good information or bad information, right? Or this information is incomplete. Okay, hey, this information is very thorough. And right at this time, the reason why I'm saying this is everybody now is getting access to this information without having a code to learn how to, basically consume it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so, it's like consuming food. Food is information. I talk about this in my nutrition stuff. Your body has a kind of a preset on how it's going to respond to this information that you're putting into it. Well, your mind and, again, your body and nervous system are the same way. Even for maybe the noises that are happening outside of your window right now, where somebody's mowing the grass, your brain's blocking it out for your conscious mind to hear it. But now, if you listen, oh wait, it's there. But I was blocking that out. So you're still getting that information whether you like it or not, right? So you're not always aware of all the information that your body's processing. And then when you go to try to consume this high level information, you can't always understand it, like you're saying, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a big issue to fill with that. And part of it is, your layman is never designed to understand that. So us as fiduciaries of this information, we in journalism to the doctorate level, we have a responsibility to try to give people the best information. And then on your end, stuff's always changing. Like, you can't know everything, right? Even I said this to you last night, like, I can't believe I'm still learning the things that I'm learning. But if I wouldn't have done the work to where I'm at now, I wouldn't be able to keep learning the things that I'm learning, right? And so we have to be able to embrace this learning process. Even Verkhoshansky and Sif, I'm writing about this in the second book. They were still looking at going, well, we still have some more research to do on static dynamic and isokinetics. We don't have all of everything. And everybody always quotes Sif, and particularly Verkhoshansky, like he was this flawless god of sports science that had every single thing figured out. Well, Verkhoshansky, Matveev, we talk about all these people, but they were scientists. They were learning as they were going too. That's one of the reasons why they got into it, right? And then we come back and, what you're experiencing now, people are attacking you and they want you to be absolute, right? And it's like, no, fellas, no, ladies, this is a learning process that we have to go through, right? And most people, it takes 10 years at least to go through this journey just to have some type of real foundational understanding of what we're doing and really anything, right? It takes a considerable amount of time. So
Yeah.
I'll end my rant there, but yeah, the information part of it is legit, right? And that's again why I'm doing what I'm doing, is because I've just been seeing this for years, right? Of the confusion behind this, and also a lot of this information hiding in the physical therapy literature.
Yeah. And, people, look, there's a phrase that this one coach told me that I really like you try to do your best until you know better. Because this is an ongoing, this is a new field. This is a new occurrence in the human race for us to have the privilege, the calories, the air conditioning, the tools to actually strengthen and stimulate our bodies to produce more force. Like this is a new thing for the human race. We've never really been able to do this well. I mean, we have like ancient gladiators who used to train and used to throw stones or get into the water and swim and stuff like that. But to do it at the level we're doing it, where we can actually have like consistent high paying sports. Like sports has never been able to be profitable for human beings like through all of human history. You're always, it was always a struggle. And now we have professional athletics, we have a whole industry and economy behind this. So the point I'm trying to make is that this is very, very new stuff. And people get really upset when you kind of go against what they think is true or what the mainstream is producing, as being true. And a lot of people forget that this is an ongoing process, like rocket ships, right? Like fucking helicopters, like everything. It's always getting better, and we always got to be open-minded and learn and just be okay with doing things that might not be most optimal. Like I still do certain things. Like I was working with a client, right? And I'm not sure exactly, he has got a meniscus injury, and I have him working the up squat, I have him doing this, but I still had him doing some soft surface balancing, right? Because he had a lot of weakness in his tibials. Now, is this the best thing that he should do? I don't know. This new up squat, isokinetic, weak angle, strong angle philosophy has had me kind of like a little confused and questioning a lot of things that I'm doing, but I don't know yet. We don't really know. So I'm still just trying things and see what kind of responses we get out of it. Like I'm still making attempts, even if it might not be the most optimal. And some people don't just can't accept that feeling. They want that control, like that what we're doing, like this is the way to do it. And Forshansky said this way, and it must be done this way. And all of a sudden, dogmatic responses show up, and people weak angle their training even more, or they weak angle their philosophies. Now you got like freaking movement wars against each other. Where you got the CSCS community at war with the functional patterns community at war with GOTA, and then GOTA's at war with like nervous system. You got all these different things, and then you got like all these like fragmented philosophies, like early MMA. It's like early like martial arts used to be, right? And so right now we're kind of going through a great like filtering of like all these different processes.
You must be reading my mind. There's something going from Florida to Michigan right now. Some telepathy, but that's exactly what I was thinking, right? I write about that in the book, right? That jujitsu was unknown in 1992, right? And now you can't fight without it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the up squat, and I was saying that about the strong angle in general for a while, right? And this idea, but the up squat opens up a whole different understanding of what's going on. Wait, we can strengthen the body and under loads and speeds with maximum safety? What? Like that just doesn't really exist. Like when you really understand the mechanics of this, of going from control to chaos, the up squats actually are really, if it never, sells thousands and millions of units, it's still representative of a fragmentation that's being missed, blind spots that are being missed in what we're doing. And again, coming back to the traditional, right? You also see people moving into box squats, right? So box squats is another way to try to keep the torso oriented over top of the base of support at a more functional angle, type of scenario. And this is actually another thing that I wanted to talk about the machine and get your opinion on it too, because your feet, I think a lot of people don't realize that your feet are only about 2 inches or less, maybe an inch apart, from while you're on the up squat, and you relatively never see anybody squatting or doing leg exercises with their feet in that position. But even, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, when you watch those really awesome videos of the Swedish thrower that's jumping up the bleachers, the big freak athlete guy who's like 6'6",
The purple singlet guy.
Gunter or something.
Yeah, Gunter or something. Mustache
Yeah.
man.
Right. Yeah. He's like Tom Selleck mixed with The Rock or something, right? And, yeah, that's always what I think when I see him. Like, I'm like, that guy should be like a movie star or something, right? How did he not get into? He should have fallen.
That guy's got a cult following from just one workout video. I wonder if he even knows that video's out on the internet. He's like, what the fuck?
Yeah, where is he? Like, I hope he's still alive. It would be interesting to get him talking about his training. I've never seen that. Yeah. And back to the videos of people doing hurdle jumps over, these really tall hurdles, I've seen some of the videos you've posted. Their feet are really close together. They're in this stronger angle position that allows the stretch shortening cycle to happen. And I think that's another thing that, we're missing on the stretch shortening cycle. It's a reflex. It's not really something that you forcibly do, right? It's it's a type of scenario. So the body hits, you're not thinking, oh, I need to switch directions and push out of this position. It's literally a reflex, right? Myotatic stretch reflex is what we're trying to hit. And so, and you've talked about this before too. If you're in the weak angle, that elasticity can't happen the way that you're trying to transfer those forces. So you have to create additional force to make that happen, which is what's economically inefficient. So now coming back to the up squat, imagine, that you have this tool in every strength and conditioning scenario to use. Yeah, now you have to start thinking about doing something differently And really, you're probably being irresponsible by not. We have this safe way of keeping the body in the correct alignment and allowing you to train in the right patterns under load and speed, which allows you to maintain integrity under that demand and do it in the safest way possible instead of jumping from more of a maximum or even moderate control to more of a moderate to maximum chaos without that in between bridge. And so our argument is this is the foundational tool. This is the body conditioning tool that we want everybody to have, because you want your strong angle to be like a piece of steel, not necessarily in the sense that the stiffness of a piece of steel, but you want that resiliency. So every time that you go into a situation, your strong angle doesn't decay. So that's also why I have you doing a lot of repetition and volume right now, right? And we've been talking about
Yeah.
this versus like
Yes.
isometrics, right? Because I want your nervous system to start basically creating almost like a cast for your body, that when it's like a dynamic cast, almost like a really functional brace that you're creating with your own nervous system, and your own neuromuscular system is doing it to keep those joints centrated in alignment while you go through these dynamic movements under load and speed, right? And so now, and we don't know this 100%, but the argument is if we condition that pattern enough, when you go into these other scenarios, and I know you're probably feeling it already, where everybody says it is the next day, typically you feel like you're walking a little taller and more upright and straighter, right? And even
Mhm.
actually, I think you said you're noticing an improvement in your sitting, right? And part of
Yeah.
it's just you're more integrated while you're sitting. And again, problems, everybody's going, well, you sit too much, you sit too much. Well, our argument is that when you go to stand after you've been sitting for a long time, you're still in the weak angle. You can't even stand up straight because you've been sitting too long. So then when you go to walk and move around, you're moving like you were in a sitting position, and you're creating that pattern. Well, when you go to stand up, the body has to be using more resources to balance you than when you're sitting. So the standing drives in the neurological pattern way more than the sitting does, if that makes sense, right? So now you keep, basically, there's a thing called a central pattern generator, which is allows you to walk and chew bubble gum at the same time, right? And so now you're really reflexively creating that pattern in your system, which again leads to more leaking of your kinetic chain.
Well, can animals not eat and walk at the same time? Other animals? Is that
That's a good question.
exclusively a human being thing?
I doubt it. I mean, animals are so cool, right? Like I think they're in some ways, because they don't have as many things to do as us. I think on the basic levels, because they're walking and chewing bubble gum and maybe thinking about making a baby, and that's about it, right? For us, we're bringing in all this unnecessary. Is it we have quad dominance or ligament dominance? The animals aren't thinking about that, right?
It's
Yeah,
interesting. I looked that up. I'm trying to think back. I don't know if I ever seen an animal chew and move outside of us. Anyway, random thought.
yeah, and again, I would bet it's more of a prioritization on their end of being neurologically efficient. Why would you try to do those two things at once if you don't have to, right? And
Yeah.
we see that with most animals, even apes, right? They're very lazy and kind of not moving, and then they explode and move and do a bunch of stuff, and then they kind of go and chill, right? And you'll see them, eating in a very relaxed manner. And again, there's actually I'm writing about this in the new nervous system book, is that you really want your body in a parasympathetic state when you go to eat your food, because when you're in a sympathetic state and you eat, you don't digest your food as well. That's why you're supposed to sit down at the table and turn the lights down a little bit and maybe put on some
Mhm.
romantic music and eat your food, right? It literally helps you digest your food better. So there could be something to that as well.
Yeah. Now, to kind of like recap on some things, that a lot of people are trying a bunch of different methodologies, and I've even experimented with a lot of different methodologies to improve leg strength, injury prevention, knee health, all that fun stuff, glute activation. Now, a big one that's going around, and this is partially my fault because I kind of got this technique really popular. I did an Instagram reel about it, right? Because I first heard about it, I thought it was interesting. It reminded me a lot of like what the Chinese Shaolin monks were doing. And that's this extreme isometric lunge that got really popular by the Evo Sports System with Jay Schroeder. And I remember I was looking at it, I'm like, that's kind of interesting. Like, I never thought about that technique, doing like really weak angle maxing lunge positions where you're just lengthened your legs like as far as possible and you can try to create force internally, whatever. And you just try to hold that bitch for as long as you can. And I remember when I was learning about it, I was like, shit, let's try it out. And I, made some space in my office, got in that lunge position, and I just held it. And it was fascinating because it was really an interesting experience, the irradiating effect, right? Of like muscle activation. I can feel my TFL light up really fast. I can feel the anterior tips working really hard, right? Like a ring of fire around my knee was like forming. And I was like, oh shit. I'm like, this is so fast. Like I'm feeling all these different effects. Like one side, yeah.
We forgot to talk about why the glutes are working on the up squat versus
Yeah.
so we can get back to that, but go ahead.
Right, right. Okay, so we'll touch on that. But it was just an interesting sort of like idea how like one leg would respond this way, and the other leg would respond this way, and I was trying to like interpret the information, right? And this movement, like I did this post, and it got like 2.4 million views in like 24 hours. It just went crazy viral, right? And I'm like, shit, like everyone's really interested in this. Let's experiment more. And I tried this experiment with extreme isometrics to fix these issues, and it only got me so far, right? I only noticed maybe like a 30% improvement on my hip and not really much of an improvement on my knees. I did learn some compensating muscle groups doing this, which I thought was fascinating. I thought was a cool experiment. But you were explaining to me like why put yourself in a disconnected position to fix a disconnected issue, right? And that was kind of like that was like really interesting because now that I'm understanding this weak angle, strong angle philosophy, I'm like, oh shit, can this extreme isometric, could this idea actually have like a real serious flaw? And I wanted to kind of hear your perspective on this extreme isometric because people are weak angle maxing with this lunge position. It's partially my fault, like freaking crazy right now on the internet.
Yeah, so it's interesting because you and I have talked about this. It's interesting the influence that you're having with this, which is really cool. But with great responsibility, how's that? With great power comes great responsibility, right?
I
It's
didn't ask for this power. Listen, I'm going to say this right now. I don't. Some people say that like you need to be responsible for. I just make videos and people start showing up. I never asked for this. I try my best, guys. I really try my best, but I don't. I'm retarded. I didn't go to college. I'm a high school drop. I get shit wrong. So just a quick disclaimer before anyone takes all my advice as law. Definitely consider I get shit wrong.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to interviewing you on my podcast. That's one of the things I want to do at some point sooner than later, and just kind of talk about how you've gotten from where you were to now, and how things have changed. But so we can get into that. But the extreme isos, right? So first of all, isometrics, right? They are very specific to the angle that you're doing or the movement that you're doing, right? Primarily isometrics were really adopted because they were a safer way to create muscle force, expression with less torque, and obviously movement to the joints, right? So you can work around ligament issues. You can also work on learning patterns of movement a little bit easier because now you're not moving, and so your body knows where that proprioceptive feedback is coming from. Okay, I know where the hip and the knee is. I can hold this position. It's easier for the mind map to recognize that while you're static versus moving. But then again, now we have two of the issues. You're static, right? It's not creating a dynamic map, right? And then secondly, the specificity of the isometrics being in a specific angle where the force production only carries over. I think this is probably one of the biggest things that's missed because you have to go into the literature. Like in physical therapy, we do what's called multiple angle isometrics, because we know that the carryover only goes, and I need to make sure I know this, but it's somewhere between 15 to 30 degrees, I believe, that it carries over to. And if you don't do the movement in that next 15 to 30 degrees of the range of motion, you don't express the same benefits.
That's like
Does
where
it,
the three position holds come from.
correct. So the three position hold. Yeah, if you only do it in one position, you can't express the force the same way in the other two positions, because it's just neurological specificity, right? The body's learning that, specific organization and pattern. Um, so right. So the idea of only doing the isometric position to the maximum in the weakest angle, and this is kind of the stamp on it, right, is that you're trying to fix a weak angle problem by going into the weakest angle that you can go into.
Yeah, it's like trying shit. I like to fuck around.
Right. And right, no, and again, you're doing your best, and you're seeing these things, and you're hearing these things, and going, well, maybe this could work for me, right? And this is also a part of what happens when you're a little bit desperate. You can't solve your problem with the
Yeah,
traditional
yeah,
ways, right? You start looking for anything, and then you do something that could possibly be making you worse, right? And so even to the argument, I could see doing it for some of the benefits. We know that you get stronger in those lengthened positions. There may be some injury prevention possibility that goes there, but again, like Conor's injury, we know you can't switch directions in that maximum weak angle. So from a functionality, and again with the multiple angle isometrics, you're not going to transfer that over. So you have to be doing some other things, and again, maybe one of them would just be doing some isometrics in a position where you can actually 1 inch punch. Maybe you would actually get more benefit. Maybe if we did, the extreme isos in 3 angles, right? Again,
hmm
why just do it in that deepest range of motion scenario? So the brain can't really create that map. But most of the people, I think that, and Adam Archuleta is obviously an example, he was doing many other things, right? And also
right.
bringing in probably a relatively healthy base as he was still, playing. He didn't have a 5 year layoff like Conor, right? Like that really matters, right? Your developmental past, what you're bringing in, your training history, training age, all that stuff that people talk about matters a lot to what you're doing, and why you're getting the initial gains that you're getting, and also why you get the diminishing returns that you're getting. Right. And so now, again, if I'm overloading the weak angle, we know the tendons and ligaments are getting stressed that way. And so we think, okay, this is creating this maybe structural change, but neurologically, it's not. Right. So you have to work on both the neurological, neuromuscular component, as well as the structural component. And it's just not really possible, with
hmm
that. But there is a lot of integration. There's part of it I like, right? The torso's more upright. Like you said, you have to recruit more muscles. You have to figure out how to breathe, right? That's another part, right? If you're holding an exercise for that long, you can't hold your breath. So and part of it, you just from a toughness scenario, right? You have to sit there and mentally deal with that. You know what? Could I hold it for another 10 seconds? Well, probably. But you know what? I just bitched out and quit, right? And so
Right.
there's a part of that can be beneficial as well. But do we need to do it, and is it solving the problem that we're actually trying to get to efficiently and effectively? That I think that becomes the issue, because again, you're burning up all of these resources. You only have so many of them, right? So you want to take those resources and get the most direct transfer that you can, because the next thing, it leads to overtraining. If you're not solving the problem, now you got to try other things to solve the problem. Right. So now
Right.
we're exhausting all of this corrective exercise when we're never getting back to solving the problem of integrity or integration, which is what we're really trying to do.
Yeah, and that's what I started to sense. When the more I started doing it, I realized that there's that I don't know what this is called, where you get the point of diminishing returns, like a bell curve, I think, where you see things kind of go up and up and up and up in improvements, and all of a sudden that it kind of drops off and actually starts having like a negative effect, right? Where I started noticing like it just it was just kind of like plateauing. Like at first it was kind of, and it was probably like the like what's it, the adaptation of initial neurological gains, where like your nervous system feels like a new form of stimulation. What did Arnold Schwarzenegger call that? Like shock the muscle. Like you hit your nervous system with a new form of stress, and it's going to rile up all the redevelopment hormones and building blocks to try to adapt, which can feel really invigorating, right? And it could also improve like blood flow to certain areas. And it did help a little bit because my hip was in a really tough, it was actually getting worse where it almost feel like a tight like elastic burning sensation going from like my hip down my like the out like behind my TFL through my calf in the back of my ankle, and it feel like it would just kind of like the tissue, like the myofascial pathway was just getting tight and burning, like going down my leg. And doing this, that went away. And then it just stopped from there. It didn't get any better. It didn't really get any worse. And so after that experiment, I'm like, okay, this was kind of cool, but it's not, like I said, it's not solving the problem. I think the principle of what my body was going through, there's something to that. Maybe, like you said, maybe that's why when I started dishing out extreme ISOs to my clients, I made two versions. I made a weak angle and I made a strong angle extreme ISO. So I feel like you get something out of it. You know, it's not people's knees aren't exploding. So it's not like it's necessarily hurting people, but there is a point of diminishing return, and it can only get you so far. And that's where we've come into this new experiment with the up squat machine. All right. And now I'm going to say this, extreme ISO guys are going to be upset. I'm getting better results faster, and it's more engaging. Listen, I don't always want to sit there and mind fuck myself on these extreme ISOs like I'm some Tibetan monk and I gotta try to like, harness the power of my ancestors while holding this fucking shit. Like I got shit to do. I got a baby I gotta feed. My freaking my shit's getting old. I gotta run a business. I gotta try to train myself. I gotta play video games. I got shit I gotta do. Right? And this up squat, I can get all this done fast. High return on investment. I love a good return on investment. I want to like get everything I can with investing as little time as possible into it because I want this shit working now. I want to instant gratification my training as best I can. And this is where I'm saying like the up squat. Okay, now can anyone do an extreme ISO at their house? Sure, right? Anyone can do it. I don't think that they're bad. I don't think that it's wrong. I just don't think now that I have this machine, I have the privilege to use this machine, like okay, whatever. Like this is the new thing, right? When I first learned about like therapy putty, I'm like, I got rid of all my clamps, I got rid of all my blocks, all that shit, like the fagger. Like, oh, I have this one thing, I can do everything fast and get all these results. I need good return on investment. I'm about that. And this up squat machine, this is what it's delivering. Right? So I've abandoned extreme isometrics entirely since I've been using it because there's no need anymore. I don't need to do it. I got something that does it better, faster. Like you said, it's like running an AI for my kinesthetic awareness. It's just faster, more efficient.
It's funny too because people will attach to one thing. Like I know there's some benefits to extreme isos for your tendons, for example, right? And then we go, well, only isometrics. Well, that's not true. Eccentrics work really well too, but neither
Yeah.
one of them work very well if you're in the weak angle, right? And so basically, and this is kind of repetition and volume is the mother of skill. Right. So skill acquisition, when we're thinking about true functional transfer, we have to work through the pattern that we're trying to create, right, and the one that we want to use. And so those extreme isos, it would be like holding a kick position and just sitting there and holding it, and you're probably going to get better at balancing in that position, but you're never doing a rep, you're just doing volume. Right. So we need to do reps and movements over and over and over again so the nervous system can go, okay, this is how we move through the full expression of that pattern. So, and from a rehab standpoint, yeah, that isometric part can build you up to better transition to the next movement dynamic, right, of the expression that you're trying to create. But if you just live in isometrics, it's never going to really transfer over, just even philosophically. right? You're gonna get some benefits, but it's just not the way that the body works, or any type of skill acquisition. You have to keep progressing and going into those other things, and that's, again, we talked about this a few weeks ago. That's one of the reasons why the up squat is so beneficial, because you're getting that same kind of stabilization or integration, organization effect that you're getting from the extreme isos, or even any iso, but now you can do it under movement, and you're doing it under safety, where now, and this is part of what I'm coming back to, because if somebody heard what you just said about the extreme iso versus the up squat, you would almost think that what I have you doing on the up squat is easy, right? But what we're doing right now, Quintin's doing a 10-minute round
Oh
on
yeah.
one of his days, where he's got to do as many reps as he can. He's allowed to take breaks, right? But he's got to work on conditioning the pattern for 10 minutes straight, right? And so with that, though, we're contracting and relaxing, we're taking breaks, we're working on breathing, right? And you're working through the pattern that you want to express ultimately, instead of just holding that position. And I think part of the anguish comes into that weak angle that you're trying to maintain, right? The nervous system already is trying to tell you this is stupid, right? We don't like this. This is too much stress to our physiology. We don't want to do this too much, right? We're going to make you experience this in a way that we don't like this, right? The nervous system has this thing that it starts doing, right? With the fight or flight response starts kicking in, and it wants you to try to stop, right? Now, the up squat can have the same thing, but you can keep doing more reps. You can keep going. You can take this break and then boom, go right back to it and keep doing it, where you're working on this neurological pattern. And then also, I know you've been telling me things that you've been surprised how your lower back has been lighting up, and things along those
Oh
lines.
yeah.
I'll turn it over to you. So where do you
Yeah,
go from?
so this goddamn 10-minute conditioning part is like my least favorite, but I do it because I do appreciate like the improvements that I'm getting. But you have me do this. uh I just squat up and I squat down, and I put some of the people go on my Instagram to watch, because I had like a like a something like "Going to Heaven" by Michael Jackson played, and I was like, I couldn't change the song, and I was like, God damn, I don't like, it's the worst song to like finish your 10 minutes, because my lower back is on fire on this goddamn drill, right? Like, to the point where I'm feeling it like where like the QLs insert into my pelvis, like those attachment points are burning. And afterwards, I'm laying on my back with my knees up, just breathing for a second, and I feel like my SI joint like pop and like move around. And when I start walking, I start feeling like my ass is tingling. My lower back doesn't really feel too pumped after it's over, but I'm feeling like it's just, you can just tell like it's just stressing the shit out of like these kinetic breakdowns. And it's interesting because now it's kind of taking, with the going back to touch on the extreme ISO. I think there's some good principles in the extreme ISO, but I think the application has some flaws to it. Where, like, why hold out this extreme ISO for so long? Well, you're trying to burn through your energy systems. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to burn through these energy systems, so your body will go through more of like an integrating process, right, to get other muscle groups to start working. But it's in an isometric position. It's not in an isokinetic position. You need that isokinetic movement to create a better transfer, correct? To like functionality.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm doing, going up and down for 10 minutes, burning through my energy systems. And like you said, like how I said, this is like running an AI. As a cool analogy, but it's like running an AI for your kinesthetic awareness. As I'm going through this, I can start figuring out, okay, how do I get, because I remember when I was going through this, my lower back is freaking killing me. And then I remember just kind of like forcing one of my left leg, like my left glute, to kind of put like a little bit more effort into the squat. Like I kind of leaned into a little bit more. All of a sudden, a huge amount of the stress came off my lower back. Right. And I was like, oh, that side of my leg is not assisting me as much. And I noticed when I kind of like get that left glute to kind of like really pull my hip forward, all of a sudden my lower back is not nearly as stressed as much. So it's like teaching me better functionality, and I'm being aware of where these like leaks are and where these bad patterns are happening, which, on a back squat or extreme ISO, you don't quite get that same sort of feedback, nor can you put that, can you start putting corrective movements, like mid exercise, which I thought was really interesting.
Right, absolutely, yeah, and you're doing it dynamically while you're moving. So, and this
Hmm.
is another thing you're making me think of too, where we irradiation and kind of this Henneman's principle of recruitment and rate coding that go on. We like to say that they happen all in a positive manner, but if your kinetic chain is leaking and you're in the weak angle, that also contributes to the compensation that's happening, right? So now your nervous system is just trying to figure out what's going on. So it might not all be good. Again, principle of initial gains, you're getting recruitment in areas that you weren't really recruiting before, but are they recruiting in the pattern that you want them to be? So initially, okay, cool, who cares? At least we're getting them to turn on and express, right? But now we got to recondition them functionally in a way that you're using dynamic movement that's also going to hold up under that chaotic, spinning jump roundhouse kick in the weak angle, right? Which obviously, it isn't possible. But now, one of the main things that people will talk about when I talk about this nervous system, sports lab, Marinovich stuff, they immediately go to fast twitch muscle fiber. Right. And so most people have this concept of that there's slow twitch and fast twitch, and that maybe that I'm, not using as much fast twitch. I think everybody wants to be as fast twitch as possible, which so much of that's also genetic, right? Then we have
Hmm.
nerves that are faster than others as well, like we were talking about. But one of the things that can happen, and so the idea is from a basic standpoint, like if I'm doing a squat with 10 reps, right? In the first 8 reps, you're basically not really recruiting your fast twitch muscle fibers. And then towards the last 2 to 3 reps, you're creating the need for your fast twitch muscle fibers to turn on. So if you're doing slow lifting, the argument is that maybe you're now starting to condition those fast twitch muscle fibers to move more slowly, to express, slowly. And so this would also go back into these extreme ISOs, right? So am I potentially, if I'm not doing the fast twitch, and this is what I was getting back to Adam Archuleta, you already got all this fast twitch expression going on because
Yeah.
you played football the season before, right? Let's just say that. And so you're not going to have as much of a detriment. But now, if you're not doing athletic stuff, particularly like this 40 and up group that's really starting to get in this, they may be deconditioning some of their fast twitch ability as well, just on the rate coding recruitment level, right? They may be starting to express those muscles differently than they actually want to, or those muscle fibers. So I just wanted to add that, and then do you have anything on that? Because I want to talk about the glute
Let's go into the
engagement.
glutes.
Yeah. So, so many like Brett Contreras and all these glute inhibition, hip thruster people, and everybody's knee problem is caused by their glutes, and, the feet connect to the glutes and the glute amnesia and the glutes aren't firing and all of these things, right? Well, I think the problem that we have is in most of the loading positions in the weak angle, the pelvis anteriorly tilts, like we've talked about a lot in these motions. But let's say that it doesn't even, and somebody's able to control it. Most of the time, though, with this quad dominance and kind of eccentric braking that we have going on, it creates so much stiffness through the core lumbopelvic complex. And when we think about the pelvis, and how it's sitting there, it needs to be able to move when we're moving, like your boy Michael Jackson, right? When he dances, he doesn't stiffen up around his pelvis and even through his diaphragm and his rib cage, right? Everything is flowing and relaxing. And again, that's kind of what I was talking about with Conor. He's got this amazing ability to be like that Ido Portal dancing relaxation movement, and then to be super stiff in a way that's able to, put that perfect, strike together where it delivers all that load into one area and knock somebody out. And so being able to go through that kind of yin and yang, is the real strong angle, right? Of this dynamic interplay between balance and tension and relaxation. So when you're on the up squat, now for the first time, right, your femurs are attached to your pelvis, right? That's where the hip joints sit. And so now for the first time, everything is stabilized and you can go through this pattern over and over again without excessive stiffening while everything is in alignment. So now instead of I'm squeezing my glutes or I'm feeling my glutes or I'm trying to activate my glutes. Well, what are your glutes primarily doing? They're doing some component of hip rotation, whether it's flexion to extension or internal and external rotation or abduction, adduction, right? The femurs and the way the head of the femur sits in the acetabulum, right? It's a ball and socket joint. So even when we think of the word hinge, right? The hips don't hinge, they rotate, right? And so we will say hip hinge. The knee is a hinge joint, and even the knee has some rotational component to it. And that's also one of the things that you're seeing on some of these hinging movements where people are doing these rotational motions. I'm sure you've seen that, right? And they'll get into this like RDL position. Even actually, one of the things that's been going around a lot right now is the oblique sling, right? Reach out really far, with this handled selectorized
Like the whole like
distance, right? Now you're almost in like a standing bird dog, right? Scenario. Try doing that while you're not holding on to that resistance and repeat that motion. You can't because your hands proprioceptively attached to that machine, which is telling you where you can rotate from. Same way with when you're doing it with a weight to one side of the body. And so all you're doing is trying to counterbalance that resistance. And then we're also thinking of a lot of the times where we're doing it linearly. Now we're doing it in this example that I'm giving. Now you're trying to rotate, but you can't take that and transfer that pattern over dynamically. And that's always my question. Like, well, how are you going to actually do that movement that you're doing in full expression? Well, you can't, right? Because we don't do anything in that position or those positions. Well, why? Well, again, the hip's not a hinge, right? It's a rotational joint. And again, for twisting and did you see the guy that was talking about he was arguing with me about twisting and rotating? I kept saying chubby checker. Did you see that? It was on one of our posts. Yeah.
no.
So anyways, yeah, it was a funny little back and forth that we have. But so when you're on the up squat, it allows your femurs to rotate correctly and also allow you to stabilize your pelvis basically in the ilium, right where the sockets are, to allow that dynamic to move correctly. So now your glutes are actually stretching and shortening the way that they're supposed to, because when they go to stretch, they can relax because they don't have to compensate for all of this other stuff that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
They can just do their normal rotational pattern of the hips and the pelvis to basically move you from one direction to the other as you switch directions, but you don't necessarily feel it because it's so efficient. It's happening the way that it's supposed to happen. So then when you're done or the next day, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really feeling that in my glutes, but you didn't feel anything whenever you were doing the machine, because this is my argument, right? Is because they're actually so balanced that they're doing their job the way they naturally would. And this would be also some of the argument if you look at the physics and the biomechanics of a box squat. So when you go to sit down on a box squat, it allows you to power out of the bottom with your femurs and your pelvis in a little bit of a better scenario, basically, if you wanted to just simplify that. And so you're able to relax at the bottom, and then you're able to push forcefully out with your glutes. So whatever compensatory problem you had going into the weak angle, right? Let's say you're favoring one side. When you go to sit down like that, it's almost like a little reset.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So now I reset and then I push back through my feet and I organize to come straight up. So that's one of the problems we have in this weak angle training, is that the weaker that we go, or the angle that we go into, as it gets weaker and weaker, the more compensation that happens, the more that we favor one side versus the other, the more that your quads kick in, the more that you hang on your ligaments, the more that you shift your trunk forward or backwards or side to side, whatever way that it is that you do. So the deeper I go, the more likely I am to express that, right? So then when I go to switch directions, I'm expressing it even more to overcome, right, the switch, basically,
Mm-hmm.
right? That yielding that I'm trying to create and then overcome it through that switch, the amortization phase. I was already off when I got to the switch. right? So now I get there, and as I try to change directions, I'm just recreating that imbalance over and over again. So
Mm.
when you go to sit down to stand up like that on the machine, it gives you that split second of relaxation to reset and then re-express coming up. So with that as well, it allows your breathing mechanics to work better. So when we have this problem in the weak angle, what's the first thing that people do under load is they hold their breath. And even though they're still breathing, they have a tendency to hold their breath, which again changes their whole lumbopelvic diaphragm mechanics and the pelvic floor piston and all of that we could talk about, which doesn't allow your glutes and your hip flexors to do the job that they're supposed to do. They
Mm.
start having to deal with these eccentric braking forces, and they have to compensate basically. I mean, I can try to stay away from going into the dissertation on all the functional biomechanics stuff, but is that making sense of what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. It basically allows your body to do what it's designed to do instead of forcing it to do something it's not designed to do, like pull, like force, like create force through a piece of steel on your back. It's essentially, and we should probably talk about the harness, the loading mechanism, the engineering on how this loads. Where there's two versions. There's like a harness version where you strap it around your torso, and it kind of has like this plate where the leverage is being happening, kind of like where like like Batman, and then you tighten it. So when you pull, it's creating that leverage from the same position that your body naturally tries to overcome force because of our shoulder girdles, right? Because of like the way our biomechanics are, like our arms like weigh something, And if you look at a gorilla that stands upright, like it's got to overcome the weight of his arms to try to extend his body. Like that's where the loading naturally occurs from us when we go from like seated to standing. Then this new version that everyone calls the roller coaster at my house, where like you put on this crazy like harness, right? That has like this soft, like hard. It's like soft and hard at the same time. This type of foam, and it goes around. It's literally like you're being like on like the Raptor at Cedar Point,
I
right?
never thought of that. That's a great visual. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but now I'm able to load because the old harness, the straps would really freaking dig into the traps, and it would create some of that protective response, right? It would create some threat. And I feel like even with like some other people that are using it, like because that would put a lot of pressure, and you try to fight against the pressure a little bit, And I noticed like my traps would kind of get a little hot, like my neck would get a little so like the engineering wasn't perfect, but with this new harness that I'm using, the roller coaster, like you don't feel anything. You don't feel any discomfort. You don't feel like the pressure is distributed, and some. It's really like shout out to Mike. His ideas of engineering. It really nailed it on this one. But now I'm able to load heavier. Where like now all my like I'd have like a 10-minute day, do 10-minute conditioning, repatterning the body, and then I would have like a medium load day, and then I'd have like a heavier loaded day. Today I got heavier load day. We'll see how this goes after all my inflammation's flaring up. But all my weights on my mediums and heavy, everything I was able to go higher with everything by 50 pounds, like easily. And I don't feel it in my like initially I feel my lower back kind of like kick in, and then my hips. I don't feel it nearly as much in my lower back on like these medium heavier days. And I feel like now I'm starting to get like quadricep and glute like burning in these sets, which I haven't been able to do before because now the resistance can go up so much higher.
That's
So
a great point, man. You're just no, I love that you have this now and you're able to experience it for yourself,
mm,
because of the different loading that we're doing too, right? So on those lighter loading days, we're still using elastic band resistance. It's relatively still pretty heavy resistance, right? But the elastic band works you in the strong angle and not in the weaker angle, right,
hmm
as much, which is also what allows your lumbopelvic mechanics at the bottom of the movement to not be overloaded, right?
yeah,
So as you're going in that switch, you don't have as much weight that's pulling you down. Some other that
right.
that slide piece on there weighs about 20 pounds, so you have that. But other than your body weight, it's not that much, and you're even offsetting some of that by holding on to the handle, right?
hmm
But then when we add the load to it, now you have to have that eccentric overload. You have to have that yielding and overcoming in the switch, and so now your glutes are going to kick in even more with the weight. But you just said it too, and I know part of it you've been encouraging me. How can we get this thing tested? How can we test it? How can we test it? Well, you just said it, right? It's like you keep adding load, and saying even this in this sense of progressive overload, right? You can keep adding load and doing more and more repetitions so fast, right? It's going to have at least some benefit on your conditioning, right? Even from that, the fact that you can just do these reps under loads and under speeds that you normally couldn't for your leg strengthening and your total body function. So just on a progression, everybody that I have worked with has the same experience that you're having right now, right? And it's just they keep going up and up and up. And again, even I have this 83-year-old guy right now. When we first started about 8 weeks ago, he could only do about 30 reps, and now I have him with no harness, no resistance, nothing, right? Only 30 reps, and he was cooked, right? Now 8 weeks later, he's doing 200 reps with the band and weight. Only 25 pounds, but it's huge for him. He came in 2 weeks ago and he's like, Lyneil, I've been working out my whole life. You have to explain to me what's happening to me here, right? And I was like, kind of the breakdown that we're talking about now. But if I would have tried to do this in the weak angle, he would have never been able to do it. His balance was bad. Even still, like he's a little unsteady when he walks. But that's gotten so much better, and that's one of the things again that I keep alluding to. Just standing up and walking is one of our most functional motions. So if it's functional, you should be seeing some improvement there. Most of the time, you do after using this. To go back to the harness, right? So yeah, that's been our biggest challenge with this scenario, especially when we went to. It started out with no weight, right? We were just going to look at using elasticity. Then we started using a weight vest, and we started going, okay, well, this weight vest is helping with this eccentric switch, right? And overloading or overcoming the yielding, right? And so then it was like, okay, well, if we want this to kind of work mainstream, we need to be able to have weight loading, even in physical therapy, right? We want to keep progressively overloading people, but we also still want to be able to work on this neurological pattern, right? So now the machine's ready. We had the new webbing harness type of thing, the Spider-Man harness type of situation. That's what we've been kind of referring it to. So we got roller coaster, maybe Spider-Man or something. What did you say? Batman? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, as we added the pegs for the weight loaded component, though, that harness didn't really work because the more weight that you added to it, the more that it dug into the shoulders. And so for an example, I know there's a video, it's either on my YouTube or back on my Instagram. When I was still in Pennsylvania, I think I had 270 pounds on it with the webbing Spider-Man harness type of scenario. And I ended up with like that petechiae across the back of my shoulders from it. Like it looked like I had a hickey right on the back of my shoulders type of thing. It was all shredded up. Sometimes you'll see that, from grappling, people will pull on your skin, right, and whatnot. I did maybe, 10 or 12 reps or whatever. And half the reason I stopped going was because it was just hurting my shoulders. And so then we just realized we're not going to progressively be able to keep increasing the weight. And kind of one of the things we've been talking about a lot of this is the Mars bar, the safety squat bar, and how that contours around the shoulders. And then also, if you look at Mike's old plyometric jumper, the elastic oscillating jumper that we have, that harness was the original one that we were actually trying to use on the up squat. But the way that it curves out, it goes too far away from the body. So it ends up actually pulling you forward more than coming more straight up and down. So the new harness, like you said, it has more of that roller coaster where it comes over, but those pads are not only are they sitting on your shoulders now, they're also kind of on the top part of your thoracic spine and your rib cage and on your more medial scapula and your upper traps. So it has a much more of a kind of a congruency on the surface area of where it's touching the body instead of just one strap coming down over top of the scapula and the clavicle with that less surface area. It's digging in. Now the forces are spread more out. And then also the way that it curves back into the body, it's kind of neat. And I don't know if you've experienced this. So number one, like you said, the biggest advantage was I just did 415 for a set of 10. And funny enough, though, I was wrecked for like 3 days afterwards. Like, that's the part I don't like, right? Going back into, we're still overloading the weak angle when we're doing that much weight. But I have to see, I'm kind of the real guinea pig on this to see where it's at. But I haven't done 415 in years, right? I mean, decades, type of scenario, even thought about it because of all of my issues. I felt fine. I had no issues. My shoulders didn't hurt. I felt awesome. I got done. I'm like, I just did 415 pounds for a set of 10. Like, this is nuts, right? And it doesn't feel light. So it's not like the selectorized machine, like where it's like, 100 pounds is really 50 pounds, right? This is plate loaded, right? Weights are going on the machine and you're moving them. So, I basically, the other part of the harness is where it comes back, it touches your abdomen as well in the front when you're in that standing position. So it also helps to tell you where the front of your body is. Again, another contact point. So you have this, really kind of comfortable, contact point that's, again, the surface area is spread out here, but now it's also giving you feedback to your abdominal cavity. So when you go to stand up, now sort of relatively where front is and where straight up and down is. And that's the thing that I've had, probably the biggest surprise on this machine is just how poor people's proprioception and kinesthesia is to where is standing up straight for you. Right. And especially if you've ever lifted weights, you automatically kind of break into this bent position, right, where you're accommodating the load for the weak angle. So you never actually really stand up straight because you're already tilting your pelvis and changing your body alignment to overcome the weight. Well, in the up squat, you don't have to do that, but people still hold their body in that position. So even coming back to your experience with the isokinetic accelerator, when you got on that, mentally you're going, I have to move this load, but there is no load, right? So most of the time why you still feel it in your knees is because you're positioning yourself for that load. And again, maybe you're tilting your pelvis or you're moving your trunk or you're getting ready to brace through your quads, right? That all those dominance patterns are there because that's what happens when you're going into the weak angle. Your body's trying to stop you from basically completely smashing to the floor. So if we don't use a very heavy weight, again, the research will show somewhere between 30 to 40%, we don't have that phenomenon, that physical phenomenon of protection happen basically, and it allows us to transfer forces more elastically. But if you've trained with heavy loads, especially even on the supercat, where you've had that decay in your amortization phase, you know that that's going to happen, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, your body's preparing you for that. So you never get to the straight position. And even if I haven't said this to you yet, the starting position on the up squat is actually standing straight. So when you're using it, and I don't know how much I've cued you on this or not or whatever, and even sometimes I forget this because you start in the sitting position, right? And so you're starting in the weak angle. Well, the thing to do is to stand up and find your strong angle first, right? Where am I standing straight? And when I do that to people, you can see them. They're trying to figure out, like, I can't figure out how to stand up straight, right? And it's kind of crazy. But again, coming back to older people, what's the one problem we have? They can't stand up straight. Right. So because we can't overcome gravity, and this comes back to solving a weak angle problem with more weak angling, right? Well, how do you think that you're going to get somebody out of the weak angle by pushing them further into it?
Yeah.
Right. It can't happen. And that's the beauty of the up squat. And again, so you have all this scaffolding and alignment, and you have this perfect harness that's now working with you so you can increase loads, you can increase speeds, you have the band resistance, you can do it without the resistance, if you don't want it. You can have the band resistance and the weight resistance. You can have the weight resistance only as well. And now, again, we can go into heavy loads and low reps. And really, we're just kind of getting it really into a little bit more of an experimental phase with that, to be honest. But, and I'll be posting this video soon. I think the first time I did it, I did 280 pounds again, maybe for like 15 reps or something. And I wasn't worried about it because I know my body's in a good alignment and I have this harness that's making me feel safe so I can produce force. Right. And that's what you want. Right. I want all of my resources going to this force production for whatever we want to say, my expression of this pattern, so I can retrain that or train that to be the best, for the redundancy of it, to express it the best way that I can in my real life. I don't want to necessarily have to be spending all these extra resources, again, in exhaustive corrective exercises or overloading the weak angle any more than I have to. And I'm not saying that this machine is going to stop anybody from ever training in the weak angle again, or also eliminating barbells or any of that stuff, but it's definitely going to make us have a new, more inefficient and effective way of looking at conditioning the body, and particularly strength. Leg day is getting ready to get revolutionized, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So people who are listening, if you're thinking more about the up squat, if you want to use it, if it's right for you, I would confidently say if you're dealing with chronic knee issues, lower back issues, neurological, like autoimmune responses, maybe stuff like that.
Are you familiar with the BFR stuff where people are using blood flow restriction?
Yeah, yeah,
So a lot of people are jumping to that, right? And it tells you that we're trying to solve this problem, but we're not solving it.
yeah.
Right. So this is almost like the extreme ISO example. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you, but you've said something along these lines that made me think of it like three times. As you talk about like which populations, need this machine type of scenario, we already have a huge population of people that are belt squatting and box squatting and using BFR and all these workarounds because they can't get to the loading scenario that they want. And again, coming back to that harness, to add to that, the load is centralized, right? And so that's what we're trying to figure out most of the time. And then the second part is, how do we get more with less? Right. And so that's
Mhm.
basically what BFR is huge in the NBA. So I'm sure your boy LeBron has had some type of exposure to it. Right. But basically what you're doing is getting more muscle stimulation with less intensity and less load, and ultimately staying away from the weak angle to do it. And so a lot of the NBA players are doing that in season. And then on the rehab side, we're doing it a lot, but we know that it doesn't really have a functional carryover, particularly because you're not doing any exercises that are strenuous. So we think that's the benefit. Okay, well, I'm not going to create any strain on you, but I'm going to, give you this pill that's going to help maintain your muscle synthesis, right? But it's not necessarily improving your neuromuscular efficiency. So it's just kind of maintaining while we're
Right.
reducing forces, right, that are going to be more aggravating, right? Well, the up squat, basically takes you in the other direction. It's safe. It's creating the correct muscle firing sequences, and you can do a lot of repetition and volume for the skill acquisition of the pattern that you're actually trying to express, right? So it's again, it's designed to revolutionize this whole scenario that we're talking about, and kind of flip everything on its head and dump everything out and go, do we really know what we're doing here? Well, here's the missing link. Now you got to rethink all of what you thought you knew.
Yeah, because and that's another thing about like the safety effect. Like if you load it too heavy, like this machine is self-correcting and it keeps you. Oh, you can. How do you think you can injure yourself? Or because usually injuries happen when you're doing the back squat. You have all this load and you're in your strongest angle because you're standing with it, right? And you don't know the realms of chaos you're about to enter once that ass goes to grass. That's where the danger zone is. And most people get hurt trying to get out of the weak angle. When you're trying to express force from bottom flexion back through extension, that rise through those extension patterns is where, like, are you going to make it through that threshold, or is it going to collapse, or is something going to give? Right? That's where the injuries are happening. So, but with this up squat, you
Well, or just to say, it could be usually right before you hit the bottom, or as soon as you're getting ready to
right. There's like
stop.
there's a
Right,
danger zone. It's the hard
right.
day, right? You got to stay when you pass through. It's for my Top Gun fans out there. when you go through like that altitude hard deck, right, you're entering the danger zone. God, the freaking puns are unreal today. I can't be stopped. So when you're going through the danger zone, right, that's where risk is going to start to happen. Now with this up squat, you have a seated that keeps you out of those. And even if you do enter it, there's one. And when I started using the machine, like I would sit down and harness up, and all of a sudden, I'm like, what the fuck is that? I'm like, what's happening? I can't stand up. And I'm like, feet pressure. I'm like looking at it, and I'm like, I just can't get my ass off the seat. And I'm like, oh, like someone else was using this. And like I elevate the seat like 2 more inches, all of a sudden I can stand right back up. Right? So I was too into the weak angle. I couldn't move. I couldn't express force from there. So that that automatically keeps you clear of the danger zone of like going into those lower depths where things can go wrong. And the second thing, if the load feels too heavy, right? Let's say I'm going up and I'm going down and it just feels way too heavy. I just gotta like just sit. That's it. You know, I don't have to like, you go on, guys. People say like our training and like, you know, super cats are dangerous and the ball work. You should see what barbells can do to people. You want to see some people get fucked up? Just go to gym fails. 90% of your gym fails is either a cable machine or a barbell, right? Those 2 things. And this thing is a cable machine that can't hurt you, and you're loading the legs. You just can't really hurt yourself on it. Right? Or you can immediately, if you need to bail, it's no problem. There's no risk. There's no like dropping the play or whatever the fuck.
And so you add to it what you just said. The beauty of it is you can adjust it to your own body mechanics.
Right.
The barbell doesn't adjust. The cable column doesn't adjust. The
The Smith machine doesn't adjust.
right. It moves in one plane. Same thing. Hack squats, right? Leg press machines. They only do one thing, and which again you can still use those things. And I think this is what will be the neat part. And I've been doing a little bit about with this with myself, but not as much because I'm just a strong angler, right? Like it's just I don't see the benefits of doing a whole lot of weak angle. But when I do these other weak angle movements, I'm better at them, right? And my case is, well, do I need to do them or do I not, right? If I'm getting better at them without doing them, how much more of them do I really need to do, right? That's another one of the real tests of this. But what was I going to say here? I want to make sure that I get back to
Safety.
the safety. No, yeah. So the safety also comes in the fact that the machine adjusts to your anthropometrics or morphics, whatever word you want to use, because everybody has a different length of their tibia and their femur. So just like you said, maybe Miranda, your wife's on there, and I don't know how people, you're what, about 6'2", right? That's
Yeah.
about what yeah. So we're about the same height. And this has been actually one of the most fascinating parts to me. My assistant wrestling coach, or I was the assistant wrestling coach, the head coach at Gannon when I was there. He's about 5'9", right? But he's a long, lanky body. And so when I went to show him the up squat, I didn't have to adjust it because his tibias are the same length as mine. Right, but I'm 5 inches taller than he is, and there's a bunch of videos that you can again find online about that. There's one where 2 girls are sitting on the bench and they go to stand up, and the one girl, you can see their tibia knee height is exactly the same, but the one girl's like 8 inches taller than the other girl, right? And then they go to showing them squatting, and you see more trunk change and mechanics, and it's like, well, neither one of them are experiencing this exercise the same, right? Well, why? Because again, the barbell does not adjust to them in their body mechanics. And so now they have to figure out how to, to organize their body around the barbell. Well, the up squat allows you to do both. Like we said, you're not completely fixed in there where you can't organize, where your nervous system doesn't have to work to figure out where your alignment is, but the machine also adjusts to you. So now you can put yourself into the best body mechanics to not have all that shear force leaking into your joints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, wow, man, we've been going for almost 2 hours and 40 minutes. This is a good one though. This was like we covered everything, everyone. Like, make sure you like the goddamn video. Subscribe. You're not going to get sauce like this on any other podcast. I promise you. You're not going to, most people can't even understand what we're talking. I barely understand it. Like, this is like, This is as tip of the spear as tip of the spear gets when it comes to performance and nervous system training theory and all that kind of shit. So like the goddamn video, leave a comment. If you have any sort of issues, strengthening your legs, elderly, your autoimmune responses, honestly, whatever your problem is, try this machine. If you want to talk to Dr. Lyneil on if this machine is right for you, you can go on any one of my Instagram posts, comment the word up squat. You'll automatically be sent a calendar link with Dr. Lyneil. You can book a call with him. You can talk to him about the machine, see if it's right for you, figure out how you can purchase it, all that stuff entirely for free because we don't give a fuck. We're here to help you with anything that you need and to provide value for you guys and give you guys solutions. That's really what we're all about, right? We're here to help, and we're confident we can help you with a lot of these issues. Also, if you don't want to bust your knee like Conor McGregor, you want to stay in the strong angle and not in the weak angle with these crazy techniques that make no sense, that are super ineffective and just totally ruined your career in 1 second, get the strong angle way. Link is in my bio. My Instagram will link the book also onto this YouTube channel in the description, and go to Dr. Lyneil's Instagram if you want to buy a copy of the book. It's a really cool book. I wish I had a copy to show you guys, but it's really, really interesting stuff. And it's kind of like, I thought I was seeing the ones and zeros in the Matrix, right? When I was learning about this nervous system training, right? But now I'm actually starting to stop the machines with my brain. I'm in the sequel of the movie, right? My powers are becoming even stronger now that I have this new lens, right? So it's really, really cool stuff. Anything else, Dr. Lyneil, that we want to plug in before we wrap this bitch up?
No, I'll just say two things. Prayers for Connor and a fast recovery, right? And anybody that got
Yeah.
hurt last night, but particularly him. I'd like to see him back. And one of the coolest things about waking up this morning, some of the people that I know, and including you, had sent me a message about, oh, the weak angle. The weak angle strikes again, basically, right? And so it was kind of one of the things when I started into this, that I was going to be at some point where somebody's going to reflect this online or send it back to me saying, oh, I get it now, the strong angle, or I get it, the weak angle. So this morning was one of those moments that was like, oh, it's happening. Right? People are
Vindication.
starting to understand this. Yeah.
See, this is why I fucking love MMA, and this is why it's the greatest sport on the world, and it's the most revolutionary sport in the world, because this MMA is literally a lab. It's literally an experiment. People don't realize what this is. This is a sport where you can implement any form of philosophy at all these different forms. By the way, all jiu-jitsu submissions are in the weak angle. But you can implement any philosophy of training, fighting, movement. Every single athletic and physiological factor can be tested, and it makes us money. How about that? How about
Yeah.
that? It makes us money. Like, that's why I think if you want to stop all war, sports and combat sports actually, I think, is the vehicle. The Greeks used to do this to actually create peace amongst the men, to keep them from going on warpath. There was I read this whole philosophical thing on why they had these games, and even Native American cultures, they would have competitions amongst other tribes to keep the men satisfied so they don't go on warpath. Right? There's a behavior to this. But MMA is a place where you can experiment and everyone can see it live, right? That's even how I came across the nervous system training methodology, is because BJ Penn went through this. Everyone can see it under the lights in a controlled environment. It can be tested and you can see the expression, even though we really can't measure it. Well, you can measure it. You can score it. Who wins the fight? That's how the experiment is conducted. And now with Conor McGregor is another vehicle under the lights where you can expose these different expressions of performance and movement and how they integrate. And we can take this as data now. It's not just a sport. We can take this as data to learn from. You go on Instagram, anyone who's listening to this podcast, even Lyneil, you're going to see Conor McGregor, Foot Valdez. You're going to see everyone's going to be tearing this apart and abstracting it, which, what other sport does this? What other sport impacts science like this? None.
And globally, right? And this is one of the reasons I compare the strong angle to MMA so much. is because the strong angle jiu-jitsu is the same in Japan or in Australia or in Peru or in Antarctica or whatever, right? Now you have, differences in techniques and all those types of things, but
But the
fighting,
principle's the
let's
same.
say fighting, right, in
Yeah.
general, type of scenario, right? It's a human thing that we're dealing with, and there's not a lot that we do. Dancing would be another one. You see that in cultures, right? We all have dance and music. Fighting and this kind of warlike stuff in most cultures, right? Some of it's just a choice of being having passivity type of scenarios, right? But the strong angles everywhere, right? And so that was another thing with this, it being a universal principle, and why, again, even just the blessing in my life that I have somewhat of an interest in combat sports and a wrestling background helped me to understand this better,
Mhm.
because it's real world universal application. And those are the things that end up standing for the test of time. Right. And again, to look into culture, I mean, what you were just saying, my brain was just going boom, 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 boom. Right. I don't think people actually appreciate enough how MMA and even just the UFC has changed how we perceive, both strength and conditioning and rehab. It's really changed a lot, because what we were doing in the past didn't really work for these guys, right?
Mhm.
And we could probably do a whole podcast on that, right? So I'm totally with you, right? The more that you follow this sport, the more you learn about the human condition.
Yeah, because it requires every quality, hard and soft. You see it all, right? And you can see it abstracted in all these different ways, and you can see the successes and the failures, right? And the number one thing is it produces a lot of money. Like in a capitalist society, innovation starts with money. We're not communists. We can't just, Joseph Stalin is not going to call us and say, hey, I need you in this lab working with these athletes, or we might have to send the NKVD to your house and arrest you. Right? We don't have a system like that. So we need a capitalist incentive. So if it produces money, it's going to produce innovation. That's why I think MMA isn't just the greatest sport on earth. Sorry, soccer fans or footballers. MMA is just better, right? It's because it's going to have so many more demands. You have energy system demands, you have flexibility demands, you have dynamic movement demands, you have strength demands. Unlike, say, soccer, like the demands are far less, right? It's just less expression because of the confines of the sport. MMA, it's free expression, right? It has very little limitations.
And even with that, we're still seeing like all these, people from other countries came to the United States and was like, oh, this place is way cooler than we
Oh
heard
yeah, I
about.
love it.
Right, kind of thing. So, right. So, you come back to sports, even Kyle Snyder just competed against Sajalayev, Abdul Rashid Sajalayev for like the fifth or sixth time, hurt his knee. Snyder wins, but, in the kind of the hype up, coming into that, Sajalayev was talking about what a good dude Snyder was and how he helped him, and the bond that they've made over the years and whatnot. So coming back to sport and combat sport, right? It may stop a World War III from happening. You got all these people interacting with cultures that they never have before, and then you got Chael Sonnen poking at the Brazilians and whatnot. But he lived in Brazil during that UFC time, and I'm sure that he got another hands-on first type of experience firsthand with the Brazilian culture versus living in wherever that mean streets of Oregon or wherever he's from up there, right? You go and visit these other places and you mix with people from other cultures, and you learn to appreciate them, that they're just a human being just like us. And I think that's what's going to to stop us from looking across the water and going, oh, let's send a bomb over there, but at the
Right.
same time, we know history repeats itself, right? So a lot of times it's not usually for the right reasons. It's usually for some capital reason, right? So
Mhm.
hopefully we can avoid that, and sports can help continue to do their thing to bring peace like that. I really like that position that you just put out there. So it's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. It's been the way to the more sports show up globally with their species, the less war shows up on average. That's usually because athletics was not what it was before World War II, but it definitely got bigger after World War II. I think that's a very pivotal event for the human race to process through. You look at like countries like Dagestan. They literally have wrestling programs that keep their teenage men, their younger men, out of terrorism or out of war and conflict. Right? It's a substitute. It's a substitute to satisfy that part of the human nature. But we basically we basically said everything there is to be said on this one. And I'm starting to feel my brain cells are starting to fry, and I got some other things I got to get done today. But thank you for jumping on. This is a great one. I feel like we freaking really, really broke things down. It was a lot of fun. We're gonna do another one.
Hearing this one.
Yeah. We gotta talk. I'll give you a call on the phone. We should probably set up like because you got Paramount Plus, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, man, we got to do like maybe some UFC recaps, especially on this. It's kind of fun to kind of talk. Yeah, and everyone's got questions at the end of these UFC fights. We can give our perspective. So I kind of like how it's a good lineup with everything. We're just in the strong angle. I just don't know what to tell you guys. It's just crazy. It is what it is. But like, comment, subscribe, follow Dr. Lyneil. His Instagram will be linked in the bottom of the description. Follow myself, get his book. Try out my training, try the nervous system training, get an appointment on the Up Squad, do all these things to help yourself, and we will see you guys on another episode.